Good evening and welcome to the February 21st meeting of the Plymouth Township Zoning Hearing Board. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I just want to read off the order of the cases tonight. First is 333 Oxford Road. Second is 803 Erlang Road. Third is Aristocare. Fourth is 550 West Germantown Pike. Fifth is 407 Allenwood Road. And the last case is 641 Old Elm Street. So I believe we want to get started with 333 Oxford Road. Mr. Solicitor, you can let him introduce the
Yes,
case.
we're going to go from one to the other here. Thank you. First application this evening is the application of Dennis Anderson, or maybe Denis. All right, because it's spelled with the French spelling. Okay. Dennis Anderson. Mr. Anderson is seeking a variance from section 1908.1 of the Plymouth Township zoning ordinance to request a variance to allow a 24-foot by 14-foot shed to be installed where a maximum of 12 feet by 12 feet is allowed. The property is located at 333 Oxford Road in the B residential zoning district.
Mr. Anderson, you want to step up to the front? State your name and have the court reporter swear you in.
Dennis George Anderson.
Want to explain to the board and to the public that's here tonight what you'd like to do?
I guess the idea is to basically get the most out of the space back here. There's an old shed back here that's been there for I lived here, which is, I guess, 2004, so it's been a while. And I guess I'd like to get rid of that and put in a bigger shed that will help me clear up some garage space and also the basement. So I've been in the area for a while, and I want to stay there and put some more money in the property. Or did the HVAC last year, plumbing and some other stuff. So that's the idea, is just to maximize what's there and most out of space.
So you want to put a shed in the backyard?
Yep, just one there, want to make it bigger and better. Basically.
Just want to make it clear because I don't think that was clear from your...
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. Anything further you'd like to add?
No, that's it.
Okay. Let's have some questions from the board. Ms. Pagat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question, will your shed have utilities installed?
No, no water or nothing like that, no drains.
Okay, not even a light? Will you have a light switch?
Maybe there'll be a light, there was a light there today, it's just a
Okay.
shed, yep.
But that's the only,
That's the only thing.
no heat or anything?
No padlock entry.
Okay. And what would be the purpose of it? What's your intended use?
It's really storage, of, I've got a list here of stuff that I have in there. So I got my ride-on mower, wheelbarrow, weed whacker, hedge trimmer, leaf blower, that type of stuff.
Just your general household stuff?
Yep, and I have a 6-year-old son who's got a bunch of toys, so I try to get them in there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, why is there going to be like a diminished clearance, from what there is with the existing shed? It looks like you're going to be closer to the border property
I
line.
guess the existing shed is probably, maybe it could be further back, but I guess leaving the front kind of where it is and go a little bit back, a little bit to the side. The neighbours and I behind cleared out the space. A lot of brush in there before. It's now cleared out and grassed. There's a lot more room available back there.
Okay.
And still maintain that 4 feet that I think you guys are probably looking for.
Are the neighbors okay with the?
Yep.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Aprile?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me how big your shed is now?
Yeah, I'll do some. I think it's 16 by 12.
16?
By 12, yeah.
So you have a non-conforming shed now?
Yeah, it was there when I moved in. Yes, sir.
How long you been there?
Since 2004?
2004?
Mm-hmm.
So you've been there like 18 years?
Yep.
Okay. And there's electric in that shed now?
Yep,
And that's all that's in the shed is one electric line?
yep, one light, and as checked as an underground conduit out there. Yeah.
So you're gonna leave all that in place and you're just gonna put in a new foundation for it?
Yeah, when I've talked to the two guy who does the foundation of the shed builder, they both suggested gravel base to get the weeds down and let help with drain. And that's not there today, so I think that will improve it as well.
And you got trees behind your property line? Is this your property line, this square?
Yep, that's correct, yep.
So is this the people behind you? This is all their property?
Yep, this one's a little wider here, and there are a couple trees back here. Yep,
Okay, so your property
So-
stops
so-
here and these guys come all the way back out?
yep, there's one here and a shed here that just got replaced by my neighbor back here.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, no more questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Armando?
How many car garage do you have? It's unclear from that.
Just the one car garage.
It's a one-car garage?
Yep.
And it's attached to the house?
Yep.
No further questions.
And thank you, Mr. Armando. And will you have any commercial use of the shed?
No.
No business running out of it? Just storage of your lawn stuff?
One job enough.
Understood.
Yep.
I have no further questions. Does anyone from the public want to speak in support of this application? Does anyone from the public want to speak in opposition to this application? We have no comments from the public. Mr. Sander, do you have any questions?
Briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Anderson, do you don't propose to have any living quarters or residential use of the shed? Okay. So the utilities will be limited to electricity for light
Light.
and strictly storage use.
Yep.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Conroy, any?
Yeah, I would just echo Mr. Sanders' comments. No living space and it can't be used as commercial if it's approved.
Thank you. With that, and since there's no public comment, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we grant a variance from the Township zoning ordinance number 342 as amended Article 19, Section 1908.1, as follows: to allow a 24 foot by 14 foot shed where a maximum of 12 feet by 12 feet is allowed at the property located at 333 Oxford Road in a B residential zoning district, subject to the conditions have been laid out about no commercial use and no additional utilities other than electric.
And no residential use.
That's correct.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Let's have a roll call vote. Ms. Pagat?
In favor.
Mr. Daly?
In favor.
Mr. Aprile?
In favor.
Mr. Armando?
In favor.
The chair votes in favor. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, everybody.
Next case on the agenda is 803 Erlang Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the application of Richard W. Laird and Kathleen Levins. This is a variance application from section 602.C.1 of the Plymouth Township zoning ordinance to allow an aggregate side yard setback of 30 feet where a minimum aggregate side yard setback of 35 feet is required. The property is located at 803 Erlang Road in the B residential zoning district.
Thank you, ladies. You're the applicant
Yes, Rebecca.
and owners of the property?
Kathy's the owner, the actual owner.
Okay, you want to state your names and addresses and be sworn in?
Kathleen Levins. Spell your last name? Levins.
Richard Laird, L-A-I-R-D, and it's 803 Urban Road.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you might be giving this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to explain to us and to the public what it is you'd like to do?
Yes, thank you so much for hearing our case tonight, by the way. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We currently live in an existing nonconformity house that the side yard setbacks are 11 feet 9 inches, and the total aggregate is 27 feet 4 inches. whereas it should be 35 and 15. What we propose to do is demolish the house and build a new home there with centering it on the property and giving the minimum requirement of the 15 feet setback on either side of the home. We just asked for the 5 feet of aggregate that they require in the ordinance.
Okay, so basically, on either side, you want to have it a little less side yard than is permitted under the code,
It's
or
permitted,
required under the
But
code.
more than what's there currently,
Correct.
side yard.
So you want to reduce the nonconformity, but still have a nonconformity.
Yeah. Make it
Understood.
more conforming.
That's right.
Yes. All right.
Double
Let me
negative, yeah.
see if we have any questions from the, I guess you have nothing further?
I mean, I have a whole thing here, but it's just on us in the community, but I think for now that it explains what we're looking for.
So, Ms. Pygott, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one. Do you have neighbors on both sides of you?
Yes.
Okay, so what you're proposing is you'll be closer to one of them and further apart from the other one? Because you said on one side you have, there's 11 feet on one side currently?
Yeah.
So you'll be 15
Technically correct, but it's-
and the other, okay, so you'll be further from both of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
look at the-
I was thinking.
Yeah, that's center.
You'll center. Do you have any issues from the neighbors?
This one I got
Are they all in agreement? Have you talked to them?
Yes,
She's
Oh,
on one
okay.
side of us, and the other side is an elderly woman, so we didn't ask her to come out tonight, but she knows what we're planning on doing. She's actually excited about it.
We actually went over, I sat
Okay.
down and spoke with her before we started, 2 years ago, before we started the process. COVID kind of put a
Right.
damper on things.
And most of those homes are ranchers, is that right? One level?
Yes. Yeah,
So
that's
what
what
do
we
you
have.
intend on replacing it with?
2-story,
Two-story?
4-bedroom, yeah.
Two-story, four-bedroom, two-car garage,
How many square feet?
about 3,000.
About 3,000.
Would be nice. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Pygott asked my question,
I
so
know.
I have no further.
Mr. Aprile?
So how wide is the new house going to be?
45 feet.
45 feet. Okay, that's where the 5-foot comes from. No more questions, thanks.
Mr. Armando?
No questions. Thank you.
I guess my only question is, I suppose you could have made it a longer, narrower house.
Well, yeah, if it were longer, there's trees in the back. I love these trees. They kind of grow up and out, and then they create like an archway. And I don't like to take away from the landscape. I would like to preserve those trees if at all possible.
Understood. When I look at your plan, I see the trees, so I understand. And it's not a huge variance. So, and you are reducing it. So, Mr. Sander, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Does anyone from the public wish to speak in support of this application? It's up to you.
I'm all for it.
Well, do you want to state your name and address and be sworn in?
Jennifer Toth, T-O-T-H, 805 Erlang Road.
Raise your hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony that you give in this matter, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited and looking forward to it.
So you
Seeing
support the
new
application?
house.
okay, thank you. Is anybody else who'd
We're
like?
attached by yard, so our dogs play and we just, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak in support of this application? Anybody like to speak in opposition to this application? See no public. Any further comment, Mr. Conroy?
Nothing further.
Okay. With that, since there's no further public comment, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to grant a variance from the Township zoning ordinance number 342 as amended Article 6, Section 602.C.1 to allow an aggregate side yard setback of 30 feet where a minimum of 35 feet is required for the property located at 803 Erlang Road in the residential district.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. So the roll call vote. Ms. Pygott?
In favor.
Mr. Daly?
In favor.
Mr. Aprile?
In favor.
Mr. Armando?
In favor.
The chair votes in favor. Good luck. It looks like a nice project.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. It's going to be pretty.
How you doing?
I just want to note, the public, you're welcome to stay, but you don't have to stay once your case is heard. It's a public hearing, you're welcome to stay all night if you want, but
If you're having trouble sleeping, you may want to stay.
I just want you to know, you don't have to be here.
I have a question for Ms.
Self-deprecating
Toth,
statement.
actually. Are you any relation to Bernie Toth?
Everybody is, yeah.
Okay, yeah, he used to be on this board. He was a really nice man.
Oh, my husband, so my husband's sister, obviously, and everybody
We'll have to wait for something.
Yeah, I think there's no relation, no.
I figured I might as well stay on this one
Yeah.
too.
Please stay and wait for the decision to be drafted, signed,
Yeah,
and
thank you, good night. The next case is Aristocare, 845 Germantown Pike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next case is the application of Aristocare at Meadow Springs. This is a request for variances from Section 500 and Section 1908.C of the Plymouth Township zoning ordinance. The requests are to install a parking lot on the property and to install that parking lot closer than 4 feet from the property line. The properties involved here are 845 Germantown Pike and also 1939 Hollowell Road, located in the A residential zoning district.
Please state your names and addresses.
Luis Flores Vasquez. Luis, L-U-I-S.
Mordecai Frollo, M-O-R-D-E-C-H. M-O-R-D-E-C-H-A-I. Frollo, P-E-R-L-O-W.
Repeat right hand. Please swear you, do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony that you give is the truth, the truth, and the truth.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
And is this the same exact
Same.
application that we approved in 2017?
Yeah, we did have some change of administration, so it just kind of fell off the table, and we're back to do it again.
With COVID, it just makes it worse now, so we need it.
Understood. Dom, your memory is correct. Anyway, if you want to explain to the public and to the board what it is you'd like to do.
So essentially, Aristocare is a high-skilled nursing facility. We have emergency vehicles come in and out all the time. We do not have enough space to accommodate our employees or our family members that are coming to visit. So at times they are parking in the fire zones, and we have code enforcement coming in and giving us tickets to the family members and to the employees. Now, we do own a property next adjacent to this lot, and we just want to put a parking lot on it. It's zoned residential, so we need that variance, and then we'd like to put a sidewalk across the property lines so that we can access our current parking lot. Essentially, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Spygott, do you have any questions? Public comment after the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
I drove by, I was just trying to figure out where the additional parking spaces would be. Would it be in the front, close to the Germantown Pike, or in the back?
So there'll be actually the entrance for the new parking lot will be off of Hollowell Road.
Off of, okay.
Yeah. And then the sidewalk will actually lead to our main driveway that is coming off of Germantown Pike.
Okay. So how close to Germantown Pike would the parking lot?
I believe there's another parcel there. I don't know the exact dimension of that parcel. We don't know on that.
Okay. But you'll be closer than it is right now?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's all right now. That's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, is this going to be in what is currently a wooded area along Howell? Okay. So you would take the trees out, obviously, and put in the...
And then we just utilize the existing driveway that's already there.
And this was previously okayed by the...
Correct.
By prior zoning here. Yeah, have you heard anything from the neighbors, other than public comment? We're just asking.
No, nothing.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Aprile?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, the driveway on Hollowell, is that in and out, entrance and exit?
We would have to widen it, but it's just a driveway for a home. There was at some point a house on that property that they demolished, and the only thing they left behind was blacktop for the driveway.
Right, so
it
it's
would
going
be
to be in
entrance
and
and
out,
exit, yes.
right?
Yeah, in and out.
And then the entrance and exits on Germantown Pike will remain the same,
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
And you had said you don't own the parcel? Is that the parcel on the corner? Howell and
I'm actually
Germantown?
not sure on who owns it. It could be part of the 845 property, and just kind of wraps around. I'm not exactly sure on it.
Okay.
There's two parcels. You own both 1939 Howell.
Yeah, we own both of them.
Yeah,
I just don't know if that residential zone extends all the way down to Germantown Pike.
Oh, I see.
Oh, the zoning.
The residential does go down to Germantown.
So that is owned by somebody else.
No, it's not.
This corner.
No,
Okay.
yeah, the parcel goes on.
Here, in that corner, he doesn't know if they own it.
Do you see any problems with the driveway facing that apartment house?
None immediately. I mean, they do have street parking on the opposite side already, so there's enough for 2 cars to exit or to drive by already, plus the street parking.
It's wide enough for them to keep parking there?
Correct.
This parking lot would be isolated for 22 spots alone, so it wouldn't be connected to the other part of the parking lot.
Right?
So it would be limited to the amount of cars that would be coming in and out from that little parking lot.
So entrance and exit is just from Howell for this,
Correct.
for this
For these-
parking lot?
this parking
separate.
lot.
And it's employee only, if
Yep.
I remember, right?
Yep.
No more questions, thank you.
Mr. Armando?
Thank you. So, employee-only parking, what hours would they be coming in and out? Like, is there a
So
certain?
we're a 24-hour facility, so their shift change at 7 a.m., 3 p.m., and 11 p.m.
All right. And is it going to be lit, any lights?
We haven't gone as far as engineering, but we will be putting some lighting in there just for employee safety.
Is lighting a approval process, or is it, what's the limitations on lighting? Or
You just have to come in for your permits with the township.
On the zoning issue.
Yeah, just have to make sure there's no splash over with the lights.
So it's going to be employee only,
Correct.
no visitor signs, going to be any signage?
Well, the issue with making it a visitor lot is, we can't just, we want to give permits out to our employees so that nobody else from like the apartment complex is utilizing and taking up the space that we just built for the employees. So we would give the employees tags so that they can only park there.
So it'll be permit parking with signage saying permit
yes.
parking only?
Yeah, and then again, we would have to go through the application for the signage.
Is it a square lot with 11 and 11, or is it?
Yeah, I actually have a rough sketch of it. So this is Hollowell Road, and the entrance there, you can see the dimensions.
And how many trees do you need to take down?
I believe it's 8.
8 trees?
Yep.
Are you leaving any trees up, or are you taking them all down?
I think they would all have to come down.
They're all coming down?
Yep.
All right, now, no further questions, thank you.
See, my concern about it was the lighting issue. If you're going to have employees parking there at night, I mean, it's dark right now if you go there, so,
Right.
I mean, I think you have to have some kind of lighting from over the sidewalk and in the parking area for safety, because
I agree.
it's a dark area, so. Obviously, you don't have a lighting plan, but you would have adequate and proper lighting.
Yeah, we would go through that with the engineering process just so that everything gets done correctly.
And your employees will come and go 24/7,
Yep.
so. It's not like you can turn the lights off at night.
I mean, currently we have timers that, they come on when it gets dark, and then they
Right.
come off at sunrise.
Right, but a lot of retail establishments, we put conditions that they turn the lights off at, say, 10 o'clock or something because they're closed.
Right.
But you
No, but
can't do that.
we're open all the time.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, I have no further questions. Does anybody from the public like to speak in support of this application?
In support?
Yes.
Your
What do you-
question.
Okay. When I ask second, does anybody want to speak in opposition to the application? And then if you just have questions, why don't you come up and be sworn in and ask your questions?
Mary Tolucek.
How's that now?
Mary Tolucek. It's T-L-U-C-Z-E-K.
Raise your right hand. Can you please tell me to affirm the testimony that you give us,
So,
Sure. You can ask us or you can ask them. Or,
my house is at 1913 Sandy Hill Road.
Right.
And the back of my property backs up to, I'm not sure if it's the side or the back of the nursing home.
right.
If I could see some sort of drawing or this rough sketch, I'm interested to know exactly where it's getting to.
The Plymouth Rock Apartments are on this side.
Right.
You're down here somewhere.
I'm the first house
Yeah,
on the
but
flag
you're
lot.
still-
Right.
Back a little bit, because that's hollow.
I'm a flag lot behind all the other, I'm right where, I'm at the stop sign where Sandy Hill and
Right.
Hallowell, I'm in the back.
Still
So you're
back a little
So this is
bit.
gonna be on the other side of the existing home that's already there, next to our driveway.
There's two houses here,
Mm-hmm,
and then this parking lot, and then Germantown Pike.
right, and where is
So you're
the-
back here a little bit. The home's over here.
She's a flag lot, she's in the.
No, I understand, I
Yeah,
understand.
I still don't see exactly where this, you're asking for it to be
Can
placed.
I pull it up on my phone?
I would love to be able to see it, yes.
So you are at the stop sign, which would be here, right? This is like that triangle intersection.
Right, okay, so,
Those are the Pico power lines. I don't, that's not where you are.
I bought those as well. We have two and a third acres, and we lease an additional acre and a half for Pico.
Okay.
So this is my house, which is right behind
So
your
we're-
parking lot, right here.
Yeah.
That's me.
So we're gonna be over here, where this is our existing driveway that's there.
Yeah.
There's the White House that's there.
Yep.
We are gonna put it over here.
All the way towards Germantown Pike. Thank you.
All right. We have another
Thank you.
public question? or-
I also would like to see that, because I'm the.
Hold on, yeah.
State
come
your
over here,
so and
yeah.
address and be sworn in.
Back driveway.
The
White House. We're going next to it.
Ma'am, I did not get your name, I apologize.
Carmella, C-A-R-M-E-L-L-A.
Right,
Thompson.
okay, thank you. And your address?
So I'm the daughter of 1935 Hallowell, which is that White House that you're talking about next door. So I just wanted to see.
So
I'm here
on
tomorrow.
the back driveway that we have on Hollowell, you're the right side?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna put it, we're requesting to put it on the opposites, on the right side of that home.
Yeah, so there's tree lines right there between my property and there. How's that going to affect those tree lines?
Well, I don't know exactly where the property line is, but we are gonna be taking some of the trees out.
Okay.
So your property would be over here.
Okay.
I don't know the exact distance.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, do you have to have, how much distance from the existing property line do they have to put the lot?
They're asking for relief for 4 feet. No closer than 4 feet from the property line.
And that side of the parking lot's gonna be 56 feet off of the,
Okay,
off of the property line.
And then, so where would,
6 feet here,
gotcha.
so where would the,
4 feet here.
Yeah, this is the
Right.
property line that we're proposing to cross, to go into our
Okay,
existing
I don't have
driveway.
dimension on it.
Yeah, that one's right there, 4 by 23. Sidewalk's 4 feet.
So-
Oh, 4 feet, no, it's 23 feet, that's wrong, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
Between
know where the
3
4
feet.
foot is, yeah.
I didn't know if it was here.
Yeah.
Between the end of the parking lot to your property line will be 56 feet.
This is
Oh,
56 feet?
56? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
only- I
56
thought-
feet.
No,
Oh, as opposed to 60?
the variance that we're asking for is to allow us to cross this 4-foot requirement.
Oh,
on the property line.
behind your parking
Behind.
lot? Oh, okay, so it doesn't affect the property next door?
Nope.
Oh, okay. And then where would the driveway be? Closer to Germantown, though?
Yes,
Not
further
closer
from
to
you.
the house?
Yep.
Oh, okay, all right.
There's already a curb cut there.
Yeah.
If you drive by.
Oh, yeah, there
That-
is,
Is
yes.
that you're using that existing?
That's what we would just utilize,
Okay,
make it a little bit
okay.
wider for
All
right
right,
now.
perfect, yeah. I wasn't sure if it was going to be on this side, or,
Yeah, I almost bottomed out my car.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. No, I had to post it, zoning post.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for the applicant? Mr. Sander, do you have any?
I do, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back in 2017, when the initial relief was granted, I should say the original relief for this variance was granted, the owner was GK Plymouth Realty LLC. Has that changed?
No.
Okay. I thought you guys said you own Aristocare at Meadow Springs owns both properties.
Sorry?
You speak on that.
The managing, how it works in the healthcare setting, there's the the property owner is listed as a separate entity as the operating of the licensed healthcare beds.
Okay. Who's the legal owner on the deed of this of both properties?
The GK, whatever is listed.
GK Plymouth
Yeah, Plymouth.
Realty
LLC.
LLC owns.
Both properties.
Both properties.
Okay. And Aristocare at Meadow Springs is the licensee who operates the. That's a fictitious name?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, for the Department of Health, it's a recognized name.
Okay.
But it's the ownership.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, back in 2017, there were some conditions placed on approval, namely that you comply with the testimony and exhibits presented at that time. I assume that you agree that you comply with the testimony and exhibits presented tonight?
Correct.
As well. The applicant shall provide lighting of the parking lot as required by the township's code and to the satisfaction of the township lighting consultant. Is that agreeable?
Yep.
And that the parking lot shall only be used for the nursing facility, we could be more specific and say employees of the nursing facility and not for any other use. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Mr. Conroy.
If approved, this would probably have to go through some sort of land development process, whether it's just a waiver or even just grading and improvement construction permits, but our township engineer will have to take a look at that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yep.
Thank you. With that, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the request of variance on the parking lot, 4 foot closer than the property line, for Aristocare at Meadow Springs, their operating entity, I guess. It's an operating entity.
It's an operating entity, yes.
Subject to all the provisions that were mentioned in the original approval back in 2017.
And that the parking lot be limited to employees only for the nursing facility. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Let's have a vote. Ms. Pygott?
In favor.
Mr. Daly?
In favor.
Mr. Aprile?
In favor.
Mr. Armando?
In favor.
The chair votes in favor. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
sure you'll be in touch with Mr. Conroy. Thank you. Thank you. The next case is 550 West Germantown Pike.
I'm gonna bring it better than that.
That was terrible.
Yeah, that was great. That's why he asked me existing features will be popular. That's an existing.
Yeah. That's what needs that. They tell these people got to give us pictures and stuff. That's horrible.
I got a better one. I had a good one.
Mr. Sander, do you want to introduce the case?
I sure do. This case is the application of Chipotle Mexican Grill, Inc. The property is owned by WV Universal LLC. This is an application for variances from sections 1101J4 to allow 29.5-foot side yard setback required. Variance from section 1700.D as in David, .5 to allow 25 parking spaces where 57 are required, and that they, they're permitted at 1 space per 50 square feet of gross leasable floor area to operate a Chipotle restaurant at 550 West Germantown Pike in the shopping center zoning district.
Thank
You
you.
are?
Good evening. My name is Doug Maloney. I'm the attorney representing the applicant, Chipotle Mexican Grill Incorporated. To my left is Ryan Armour, project engineer from Collier Engineering and Design. To Mr. Armour's left is Lori Pellegrino, who is a real estate manager for Chipotle. And to Ms. Pellegrino's left is Jeff Fiore, who is Collier's traffic engineer for this project. I'll try to keep this brief. I know you have several items on the agenda. Very briefly, you're probably familiar with this site. It is about a 7/10 of an acre site located adjacent to the Plymouth Meeting Mall. It's 550 West Germantown Pike. It is a former TD Bank building. We're proposing to repurpose that building with a few alterations for a Chipotle restaurant. The distinguishing feature of this particular restaurant is that it has a pickup window called the Chipotle lane. You'll note that there is, I believe you have the plans in front of you, there is a stacking lane for 8 vehicles in that drive-through pickup lane, and that is a really an innovative way of handling orders for the Chipotle restaurant. It is strictly a pickup lane. Approximately 50% of Chipotle's customers that have the Chipotle lane will order online or using a mobile app, and they pay for it online. They get a pickup window, a window in time in which they can pick up their order, and then they drive and strictly pick up their order at that lane. They show their mobile device, show the order, and a Chipotle employee will hand them their order through the window, and they drive off. And this significantly impacts and reduces the parking demand for a Chipotle restaurant. So that's my summary. I know you have several other applications. If I could have my witnesses sworn, and in all likelihood, I'll have very few questions for each.
Ryan Armour, R-Y-A-N, A-R-M-O-U-R, and I'm with Colliers Engineering and Design.
Next man, full name spelled?
Lori Pellegrino, Lori, L-O-R-I. Pellegrino is P-E-L-L-E-G-R-I-N-O. I'm a real estate manager with Chipotle Mexican Grill.
Jeffrey Fiore, J-E-F-F-R-E-Y, F-I-O-R-E. I'm a principal with Colliers Engineering and Design.
I'll raise your right hand. Swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony that you give in the trial, the truth, and the truth, and the truth?
I do.
Doug, before you get started, was there a letter or something from WV Universal LLC authorizing the Chipotle to bring the application?
A letter of intent that I believe was submitted, the application.
I didn't see it.
It's signed, yes?
He signed the
Oh,
application,
okay,
but he
I'm sorry.
didn't, but we don't have, is that you? Because I see, I don't know who that is. There's no,
That is not me.
That is, I don't know who that is.
representative of the owner.
That's the owner. Oh, that's the owner.
That is the owner.
Yeah.
But the owner is an LLC.
Right. I see the letter with the,
engineer.
yeah, the traffic engineer's letter.
I have a letter of intent, if you'd like, I can submit that as a...
Sure, absolutely.
Offering Mr. Sander a letter of intent dated October 4, 2021, which is a letter of intent relating to a proposed lease agreement between Chipotle Mexican Grill, Inc. as the tenant and WV Universal LLC, the owner of the premises, as the landlord.
I will mark that as Exhibit A1. Can I keep this?
Yes.
Question for your two engineers. What kind of engineers are they?
I'm a landscape architect, licensed in the state.
You're a traffic engineer?
Yes.
PE?
Yes.
I will note, Mr. Chairman, that Exhibit A1 shows the landlord as WV Universal LLC by Victoria Wang, W-A-N-G, doing business as WV Universal LLC, and that appears to be the signature that is on the application. So I think that we've checked that box off. Great.
Thank you. May I?
Yes, continue.
Mr. Armour, you've been sworn. First of all, did I accurately describe the application?
Yes.
And the variances that we are seeking involve a side yard variance and a parking variance, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Would you describe the project, please?
Yes, so I'm sure everyone is quite familiar with the area located along 550 Germantown Pike. We're right in front of the Plymouth Meeting Mall. Directly across the street to the west is a business building, office. To the north is another office building that also contains an urgent care. And to the east and south is the Plymouth Meeting Mall itself. Our accesses are off the interior loop road of the mall. As you enter into the site, there is a full movement driveway here in the southeast corner. Vehicles can proceed into the parking field, or they can immediately turn right into the Chipotle lane, where we have 8 stacking spaces. Upon coming around the building and picking up their order, they can exit to the west and come back around the building. If their order's not ready, they can go into these pickup stalls out in the front, where their orders can be brought to them if needed. There is a bypass lane along the rear of the property in case for any reason a vehicle needs to get out, and also it's a wider area for emergency vehicle access. Vehicles can also exit out the back of the property to this existing exit-only driveway that goes up towards the urgent care and then back to the loop road of the mall. We are proposing a dumpster in the rear of the property. There is some existing vegetation you can see up here in this top corner. We're going to do everything that we can to preserve that vegetation to aid in screening the dumpster when we do put it in. And there is an existing three-car pickup window for the old bank that we will be removing as part of this process. Part of our relief is putting this 79 square foot addition on the side of the building with a little bit of an overhang. That's the pickup window. The front of the bank, if you're familiar with the TD banks, they kind of have a big, very big glass vestibule when you walk in. That glass is actually going to be removed, and it'll be a larger entry canopy into the facility. So that's the basics of the site.
The other variance we're seeking is parking. You want to address that?
I'll let Mr. Fiore explain
Okay,
that.
we'll let Mr. Fiore address that. You've worked with the Chipotle folks in designing this?
Yes.
Correct, okay. And is the pickup window a significant feature in determining the parking requirement for the site?
Yes.
Okay. And as I understand it, there formerly was an entranceway off of West Germantown Pike. Is it fair to say that we have no intention of reopening that driveway access?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fiore, you are the traffic engineer from Collier Design, and you've worked on this project, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you've also worked with Chipotle in determining the site layout, the location of the Chipotle lane and the pickup window, and the parking demand for the site, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Would you describe what you've done and what we're proposing?
Sure. Well, as required, by ordinance, 57 parking spaces are required. 25 are being proposed. We consulted with Mrs. Pellegrino. Typically, Chipotle is looking for 20 to 25 parking spaces for their sites with the Chipotle lane. As the Chipotle lane, as more and more fast food restaurants are going towards a more pickup window / drive-through window, especially during COVID times, it's really spiked up. Chipotle tries to get 6 stacking spots in their Chipotle lane. We're providing 8. So we're going above and beyond their demand. I also looked at the ITE parking generation manual for some guidance as far as what kind of generic demand we would see for a fast food restaurant. The site's going to have 60 seats on it. There's going to be 42 interior and 18 that are outside. That'll be seasonal seating in the southeast corner of the building. So based on 60 seats, the ITE has a parking demand of 0.4 spaces per seat, which equals a peak parking demand of 24 spaces. We're providing 25. So we meet the industry standard, we meet Chipotle standard. I think with the drive-through, the pickup lane, they're essentially moving parking spaces. And you literally show your phone and get handed a bag of food. There's no money being exchanged, there's no delay for orders to be processed. It's pretty much grab and go. I've driven through a bunch of these. If I'm there 30 seconds, that's a long time. They're literally just handing you the bag of food and you're on your way. So that line's going to keep moving. It's not like another drive-through component, vendor that you're stacking 10, 12 cars waiting for your order to get through. That's not what we're having. So I think based on all that, there's significant justification to support the parking variance for this.
And is the parking that's proposed, is that going to be adequate for a Chipotle restaurant that has the Chipotle lane drive-through pickup window?
Yes, it will.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Fiore. If you have any questions regarding the operation of the Chipotle restaurant itself, I wanted Mr. Pellegrino to be here just in case you have those questions, she's happy to answer them. That concludes our presentation.
So you have no questions for her yourself?
I have no questions. I could, Ms. Pellegrino, you've
don't want to hear
heard,
from me?
well, we have to ask you something. You've heard me describe the operation in a little bit of detail. You've heard Mr. Fiore and Mr. Armour both describe it as well.
Yes.
Have we all described it accurately?
Yes, accurately, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if we have any questions from the board. Ms. Pygott?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does the current bank site have, well, they do have parking spaces. How many parking spaces does the current site have?
23. We're actually maintaining all 23, and we're adding 2 additional on the southeast corner of the.
Okay. The other thing I was wondering, I know you said most of the business is online purchases and you wouldn't have to use any cash. Is that going to be would that drive-through be exclusive to online mobile purchases?
Yes.
So you can't do a drive-up?
No, there's
at
no
all?
order board, there's no cash transactions, it's strictly, it's done, it's paid ahead of advance.
There's no sticker boxes or menu,
No.
menu boards.
Nothing like that?
No, it's, yeah, the customer orders online, they're given a window of time to pick up the order, they go through the Chipotle and physically pick up the order.
Okay. So what are the hours for the physical in-store services?
Our hours of operation are 10:45 a.m. until 10 p.m. And those are our national hours, 7 days a week.
Okay, so the drive-through would not have later hours?
No.
They would,
No.
everything would close at the same time?
Yes. Our crew is still in there cleaning for,
Yes.
30 minutes an hour, beyond that, generally. And they're in the restaurant earlier to prep food.
Okay, so are you doing this because the current Chipotle is getting a whole lot of business right now?
No, we're
just need more
doing this
space
to improve our location within the community and to be
Oh.
more relevant with the Chipotle.
Be more visible?
Exactly,
as
exactly.
well? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is will the pickup window directly replace the existing bank drive-up window, or is it going to be
Yes.
another location?
The bank drive-up window currently extends off the back of the building
Right.
here. So you can see we're adding additional landscaping area
Right.
and the drive-through, so that entire overhang is being removed.
Okay.
And we brought the drive-through window to the side of the building to increase the amount of stacking to just maximize the
It's open
space.
now.
Okay. Will that have an overhang too? Or?
It'll have a
Yeah.
small overhang,
Overhang.
just to, keep the rain off the windows.
Okay, and is there, the entrance, I drove around there, the entrance really, the only entrance, I guess, and exit are on the ring road, around the internal
That is
ring road,
correct.
correct? You enter like off Hickory, and then go into the ring road and then into that.
Right, so you could come in from Hickory Lane up here, or you can enter in via this right-in, right-out movement, where you have the main signal here to
Yeah.
the mall that leads to the loop road.
Okay. Is there any potential for drivers like trying to cross the internal ring road, say out of the parking lot and get into the Chipotle? Is that likely to cause any kind of
Talking about
traffic
coming
storm?
straight
Yeah,
across here?
Yeah, or is that not possible?
That's no different than the existing condition that was there when the bank was there.
Okay, they'll have no impact upon that then. Yeah, those are my only questions. Thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it.
Mr. Aprile?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you tell me what size this store is?
It's 3669 square feet. I just, off the top of my head.
3739, our total building coverage.
And what's your standard size?
Our typical, if we were building a freestanding prototypical, it would be roughly 2,400 square feet.
2,400. And then in your typical standard size store, you require 25 parking spots.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
So how are you guys comfortable with a store, 150% of your standard store and less parking?
So some of the interior is not being used. As an example, the vault area is not being used.
So this is the proposed floor plan. This white area here in the back of the building is the existing vault for the bank. It's going to be closed off and not used at all. It's not storage, it's just a void inside the building. Same thing with this large rectangle area right here. Again, it's just a void. There is a storage room back here, and there's also a big walk-in cooler, office back here, kitchen area. So, and even, this kind of strip here in the middle of the building, kind of going around columns. You've got another space here between the two restrooms, a little area down here, and also back here where the old drive-through was. So there's actually a bunch of space on the interior of the building that's just being closed off because it's much bigger than is necessary for a Chipotle.
Okay, how many seats do you have in this Chipotle?
42 inside and 18 seasonal uncovered patio.
And how many do you have in your standard Chipotle?
About the same.
About the
Yeah,
same?
about the same, yep.
And so everybody understands this area here in this bottom corner of the building, it is a covered outdoor patio. So the idea is to remove the walls, and then it would be a seasonal outdoor patio, but it would be under the existing roof line of the building. So there's, other than removing the wall and, weathering these interior walls, it would be within the same footprint.
So that's where the desks are now, for the
Yes.
bank,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So you're taking out the big windows
Just smash the glass and put some desks.
and building a new interior wall, right?
Yes, so there would be a new interior wall across here and across here,
Okay.
and this would be exterior.
And do your standard stores have outside seating,
Wherever we can, wherever it makes sense.
percent-wise? Total stores to, how many stores have outside seating?
I honestly couldn't say. It's something we like to see, for these type of restaurants, these freestanding restaurants.
Do you think a variance from 50 parking spots to 25 is big?
Well, yeah, but when you consider.
How do you justify it? I'm trying to get to that.
Okay, so more than 50% of our customers are going through the Chipotle lane. So that considerably reduces the impact on the existing parking.
So is that market analysis, that 50% of customers want to use the drive-thru?
That's my analysis of the restaurants that we've opened in the Philadelphia area.
As I stated, based on the industry standards for the IT parking generation, you mentioned, for 60 seats, it generates demand of 24 parking spaces, which we can accommodate, some of which are just seasonal spaces.
So for the IT standard, 60 seats is 24 spots. Why is Plymouth Township's zoning requirement?
Honestly, I think your ordinance is a little out of date and is a little on the high side. When it comes to fast food restaurants.
Does that sound accurate?
Especially where the way they're trending, where they're going to smaller buildings and larger drive-throughs.
And I think that ordinance is a generic requirement for all restaurants. It could be fine dining, it could be a McDonald's, it could be a fast food. That's
How
my
many
understanding.
Chipotles do you have that have drive-thrus? We never heard of a drive-thru before. for
Well,
Chipotle.
it's not, we don't call it a drive-through. We call it a Chipotle because it's not a traditional, it's far from a traditional
Okay.
drive-through. A traditional drive-through, a customer pulls in, places the order at the restaurant.
Yep.
And that's where you see like the long lines of cars, Our restaurant is very different. We're ordering before you arrive to the property, and you're given a time span in which to arrive. So in this area, in the Philadelphia area, we have less than a dozen currently. Between New Jersey and here, there's probably, there's about 12 in the state of New Jersey. Some of those are within the Philadelphia market.
Compared to your total, then, what percent's that?
We currently have just a few hundred, like almost 500 Chipotlanes in the country.
500 Chipotlanes?
It's a relatively new prototype for the company.
Right.
We've only been doing them the last couple of years, which is why we only have about 15 that are currently open. However, our plans moving forward, the very large majority, probably 90% of the locations that we are working on in this area and nationally are going to be
You're moving
Chipotle.
towards it.
I'm sorry?
They're moving towards this Chipotle.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So what happens if I'm driving down the street and I see Chipotle and I want to go in there? I got to pull over?
You have to pull over and
find
place
a
an
parking
order.
spot. I got to park somewhere, right?
Yeah,
Is there a parking spot for you to do an order on your phone?
well, you would use one of the parking spots on the property.
You could still go inside the store.
Yeah, and, oh yeah, absolutely, you can still go inside and order.
Okay.
If you, on an impulse, want to get Chipotle, that's likely what you're
That's
going to do.
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we're not shutting down
So you don't
the-
think it's going to create congestion in the parking lot if people start doing that?
You know, I can tell you that we have plenty of restaurants with a very similar number of parking spaces that don't have the Chipotle, and, you know, it operates fine.
Okay. If you needed extra parking spots, have you talked to the mall, or is that urgent care on the left side to see if you could utilize some of their spots?
We have not talked to them all. We feel that the parking field that exists is sufficient.
Okay, even though it's not even close to the township ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me again what you're doing with the driveways, because there's 4 lanes and now we're going to 1?
Well, right now, there's a three-lane overhang.
But that's
over
just
here
in the
and a
back.
bypass.
That's just in the back, right?
Yes, yeah.
And where's the pickup window?
The new pickup one will be on the side right here.
And how many lanes are on the side?
There's one pickup lane, and there's a bypass lane.
Okay, now, today, there's 2 lanes to drive through?
There is one wide lane, but it's in reverse direction.
So are you really going from 4 to 1? Because at the back of the building, you're not picking anything up, you're just stacking cars.
4 to 1. As far as, I don't think it's an apples-to-apples comparison, because you're talking about a drive-through bank versus a pickup lane for a restaurant.
Okay,
So-
but you said you're going from 4 lanes to 1.
Well,
But in
there's,
actuality, if you're going 1 and you're just widening, or you're making a second lane for a passenger.
No, so there were the 3 drive-through lanes and then a bypass lane for the existing bank.
Okay, so stop right there. When you had 4 drive-through lanes, what's back there now? You can't pick up your food in 4 lanes back there.
it's set up for a bank. It's set up for a bank drive-through.
I understand that.
So you have, right now, you have
So why
43
are you
foot.
comparing 4 lanes to 1 lane?
I'm not,
There's
we're not
nothing going to
comparing
be
that.
there.
We're not making that comparison. Right now, there's 43 feet of asphalt out there.
I know it very well.
We're changing it, we're taking 19 feet of that asphalt out and making it green and making 1 lane for our pickup window.
Okay. Is there any reason why you're not adding parking back there?
Because it would, per the code, to have a 2-way driveway would have to be the 26 feet. So there's really, by code, there's not dimensionally enough space
So
back
are
there.
you
to have
changing
parking.
one of those driveways to 2 ways? Is that what you're doing?
No.
No, so this is an existing full access driveway right
2-way,
here.
right.
2-way. So as it is
And then there's
today,
another one up there, right?
This is one way
this is a
out.
one-way exit.
Out?
Yes. that's how
So
it's
as it
today.
goes today, you would come in, take a right, go into the bank, do your banking, and you can either take a right or you can,
Take a left.
or take a left
And go all the way around the building.
and go all the way around the building. and
There's no
leave.
way you could get on Germantown Pike from there, right?
There used to be a driveway right here.
And that's
That was
closed.
removed by the bank.
Okay.
Our understanding is there were some difficulties they were having, and that driveway was removed. So we have no intention of adding that driveway or going to PennDOT to ask that. We're just going to use the existing access. We are widening this existing curb right here so that we can get the bypass lane in. So we're moving that out, say approximately 4 feet, so that we can have a sufficient bypass lane, so that 2 vehicles can get around the building at all times.
And that bypass lane is next to a retaining wall, is that right?
There is a retaining wall right here along the property line, which we were not going to be in conflict with.
So it'd be wide enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No more questions, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Armando?
Thank you. So what's the time frame as far as when you order, to how long until your food's ready?
Within an hour or so,
So if I wanted to eat at 2, I wanted to pick it up at 2, I have to order it by 1:30.
probably, yeah.
And then, you don't foresee any spillover parking in that mall parking lot? I mean, it would seem logical to me that if I had to wait a half an hour, I might, if the parking lot was crowded.
You don't have to wait half an hour. You're choosing to use the app. You can
Right.
always,
You order it
you can
before
always
you...
come to the parking space and walk into the restaurant, get your food right away.
Okay, do you think, and what's the township is, how many per seat?
It's one parking space for every 50 square feet.
So it's a square footage thing, not an occupancy?
Yeah. In certain districts, I believe it goes by seats.
Okay.
Maybe one or two districts.
I mean, we actually use Carrabba's has a drive-through lane, and it worked out really well, so I see where you're going. I mean, I think it is the thing of the future. My only concern is people trying to park in that parking lot, that if it's, you have 60 seats and 25 spaces. That's my only concern, is people going over to the other lot.
Well, if people are coming into the restaurant, you likely have a couple of people in one car. You know what I mean? Like, if you're eating, I mean, I personally wouldn't go into any restaurant and choose to eat in the restaurant if I'm by myself. I'm grabbing and going. So I think for the people that sit inside the restaurant, that's my assumption, that, there's more than one person in a car.
I like what you're doing here. I'm just going to voice my only concern.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And I think there's a complimentary use with the mall, because you could order while you're in the mall, shop around the mall, and then 5 minutes before, pull in.
All right, no further questions, thank you.
Thank you. I do think that people do eat alone, especially if they're on the road and
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
They're
Absolutely.
working in the middle of the day and they see somewhere they want to stop. So
Well-
for people to eat alone, that's not uncommon.
No, it's not. I wasn't saying that it's uncommon, but I'm just,
Ms. Pellegrino doesn't do it.
I don't do it.
I understand.
But you're to your point, you're absolutely correct. The other thing I'll say for the customers that come inside the restaurant, and by the way, with that comment, I'm only trying to point out that there are many times more than one person per car taking up a parking space. Not that people don't eat alone, poor choice, but our customers, even the ones that eat inside the restaurant, it's quick. You're in there for 15, 20 minutes. It's not a sit-down restaurant. So you're not there for a couple of hours. You're there for 15, 20 minutes.
No, I appreciate that, but I do think that somebody working, salesperson or something, out on the road, hey, I'm hungry, it's lunchtime, running the Mission Grill, you're running to Chipotle,
Agreed.
and you're alone.
Agreed.
I mean,
The Shake Shack. Yeah,
you're not
absolutely.
grabbing and going because you're not going anywhere. You're in your car
True.
and you're going from sales call to sales call. So
One aspect of the mobile app I'd like to point out is that you can actually schedule when you want to pick it up. So you could order it 1:30, say, and say, I want to pick it up at 3:30 or 4:30. They give you the option of, I think it's every 10 minutes.
No,
that you
that's
can
not
pick it up.
actually. You place the order and you're given a 15-minute window
Okay.
of which to come pick up the order.
I guess my concern, to the extent that I have one, is with your pickup, because if I live across the street and get there early, I know you have
So-
three. I know you have 3 lanes for overflow, but I see a terrible backup at the Dunkin' Donuts down the street, and I know that's a different operation,
It's a
but it's
different
still
operation.
it's a terrible backup. It was a concern I had when it came before us, and I see it there. I see it at a lot of the drive-throughs around, and they just don't have enough space. And I know you are a pickup, not a traditional drive-through.
Right.
I fully appreciate that, but I still have concern about the cars backing up. And I know, thankfully, you don't back up to Germantown Pike, but you do back up to the Ring Road in the mall. And while that's not as bad as backing up to Germantown Pike, it could still be a problem.
So I can tell you with the restaurants in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area that have opened so far, Mr. Fury mentioned that typically we're seeing 5 to 6 cars in our stack, and we're providing 8 here. And that's at peak hours. So, and I understand your concern, but again, the difference between a Chipotle and a traditional drive-through is there is no menu board, no one is ordered. If somebody pulls up to the pickup window and tries to place an order, they can't. There's no
mechanism. I
Right,
understand.
we're not able to do that. They'd have to either place an order and pick it up later, or park and go inside the restaurant.
Okay. I have no further questions. Mr. Sander, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Does anyone from the public like to speak in support of this application? Would anyone from the public like to speak in opposition to this application? Are there any questions from the public? Oh, and Mr. Conroy, do you have any further?
I have nothing, Rob.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I have one follow-up?
Absolutely, Mr.
We
Aprilli.
talked about dead space inside, and we're talking about square footage and one car spot for every 50 square feet, right? So right now, the TD Bank's 3880, and you're proposing 3959, which to me is 4,000 square feet. How much of that is dead space? What's your
That
real
would be-
usable square footage?
There would be 2,735 square feet for kitchen and seating area. That would include the restrooms as well.
So Dave, is that what we calculate our square footage off of?
Yes, the way we did this, I asked for a floor plan so we can,
So
slice-
57's off that, 57 spots, is that off of 2,700 square?
Yes. And there would also be 1,224 calculated at 1 per thousand. That was the dead space storage area that we came to an agreement on.
The dead space is 1224
That is correct.
total? Would you be agreeable?
That would be the dead space and the storage space.
Dead space, oh, and storage space. Would you agree to a condition that the dead space remain dead space as long as you are operating this restaurant?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
I understand, Ms. Pellegrino, that there are Chipotles in this area, Bluebell and King of Prussia. Do any of those have the Chipotle?
Bluebell, King of Prussia, no. The closest Chipotle to here would be Warrington,
Okay.
which is recent. It was a relocation of the Valley Square Shopping Center site we had. We recently opened up in Lower Nazareth, which is actually also a former bank.
Okay.
Not a TD Bank, but a BB&T.
Yes.
That's very similar, that up towards the Allentown area.
Are have they, if you had no experience with stack-ups or anything like that, I mean, operating?
I'm not aware of any of those issues. We have a restaurant in Ellsberg Circle on Route 70 in Cherry Hill. That's a recent opening, Glassboro, New Jersey, Forked River, New Jersey, Washington Township, New Jersey. They're on the Philadelphia area,
Right.
but on the New Jersey side. Summers Point, Rio Grande.
Okay.
I live near the Lower Nazareth store.
Okay.
And I'm there every couple of days,
Thank
probably.
you.
My three kids like and I'll constantly go through the pickup lane, and it really, if there's 3 cars there, and I'm going Saturday midday in the middle of a shopping center during peak time.
And that's a busy restaurant.
And it's busy. I mean, there's Walmart, there's Target, there's Wegmans, there's all kinds of
Right.
big drawers there, and they
Yeah.
knock it out
Okay.
very quickly. So based on my own personal experience,
Okay.
and I've gone various times on lunch, dinner, never had an issue.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Any
Thank you,
further-
Mr. Chairman.
Further question?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, good, thank you. Do we have a motion, seeing no more questions from the board?
I'll make a motion that we grant the requested variance from the Township zoning ordinance number 342 as amended, Article 11, Section 1101, point capital J, point 4, and Article 17, Section 1700, point capital D, point 5, to allow a 29.5-foot side yard setback where a minimum of 50 feet is required, to allow 25 parking spaces where a minimum of 57 spaces is required on the property located at 550 West Germantown Pike in the shopping center zoning district, subject to any other conditions articulated.
I was going to say, I'd like to make it clear, the conditions, and make it clear that one of the conditions be that this be the Chipotle as described, and it not become and not be permitted as a traditional drive-through.
That's fine.
And did you have another condition?
Yeah, the other condition was that the proposed dead space as shown on the plan remain as such.
It is calculated as storage and dead space.
Okay. then that 1,224 square feet will remain storage and dead space only. In other words, no customers are going to be generated by the use of that space.
Do we have a second?
Well, Mr. Daly, will you accept those
Yes,
additional
Mr.
conditions?
Chairman.
Yes. Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. So vote Ms. Pagat,
In favor?
Mr. Daly,
In favor.
Mr. Aprile,
In favor.
Mr. Armando.
In favor.
The chair votes in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to see something come into the bank that's been vacant for quite some time now.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Make the vault private.
Appreciate it.
Make the vault private seating.
Yeah.
VIP.
Right, right.
Make the vault VIP.
VIP seat at a Chipotle.
Good night.
Good night, thanks.
Mess up our conditions.
That's a change, but still. I eat a lot all the time, man.
I know. I know, you eat. Next is 407 Allenwood Road.
Mr. Chairman, this is the application of 11 CSEE Acquisitions LLC for property owned by Recycle Metals Corp. This is for a special exception to allow a truck terminal pursuant to section 1502.E of the Plymouth Township zoning ordinance at property located at 407 Allenwood Road in a resource recovery zoning district.
Mr. Lewis.
Right. Is that two or one?
One, would you like an extra? Glad I did.
Yes, we are.
Mr. Chairman is the person to ask.
Well, you made the introduction, so I believe we are ready to go.
Good evening. Rob Lewis, Capital Stewart, and I represent the applicant this evening, 11 City Acquisitions, and City Capital. Before you this evening is an application for a special exception, as you heard, for the property at 407 Allenwood Road. If the board would allow me a brief introduction, as I typically try and do, I will identify the exhibit that I've handed out to you in pre-marked exhibit packages, and hopefully try and provide a brief summary of the application and try and get right to the heart of the matter when we call my witness, Alex Tweedy. As I stated, I have handed to the board pre-marked exhibit packages. They're marked A1 through A5. First, A1, simply a copy of the application filed in this matter. As I noted at the outset, this is merely an application for special exception. Unlike the rest of the applications you've seen this evening so far, there are no variances here, and I know that the board is familiar generally with the difference between a special exception and a variance, but obviously always important to point that out at the outset for your analysis. Next in your exhibit package is A2, which is a specific owner's authorization. As you heard, the property is presently owned by Recycle Metals. My clients are negotiating the purchase of the property, and an agreement of sale is imminent, but has not yet been signed. So in order to establish standing, we had the owners execute that authorization. The property that's the subject of the application is 407 Allenwood Road. For Exhibit A3, I included both an aerial photo of the property as well as a street view image. If you're not familiar with the property itself, it is technically zoned Resource Recovery District. That district actually allows things like the trash receiving facility and other waste type facilities, but then really incorporates the heavy industrial district. So the Resource Recovery District is technically the least restrictive zoning district that Plymouth Township has to offer. The property is nearly adjacent to that trash receiving facility. It's across Allenwood Road from the IKEA headquarters building, not the retail store, but the headquarters. and immediately adjacent to the large, relatively new self-storage facility. And then on the other side of this property is Danella Properties, storage yard and maintenance facility. The property is presently operating as a metals recycling and scrap yard. You can see from applicant's exhibit A3 the general kind of disheveled nature of that type of operation. I think you can imagine some of the impacts that those types of facilities have. That's why they are located in this district, away really from the remainder of the commercial corridors and so forth. My clients are proposing the redevelopment of the property. This will eventually require full land development approval. The proposed redevelopment is actually depicted on a zoning plan that's prepared by Land Corps engineers dated February 1st, 2022. I've marked that as applicant's exhibit A4. I also have a colorized copy on the board to my left, to the board's right. Our application, as I said, is for a special exception, and it has been determined by the zoning officer that our use fits within the category of trucking terminal. That designation might not necessarily be exactly how I would describe it if someone said, what are they proposing to do there, but it certainly encompasses what will occur on the property. A trucking terminal is specifically permitted by special exception in the Resource Recovery District through incorporation of the Heavy Industrial District. Obviously very important to distinguish between the special exception and the variance. Under the Pennsylvania law, your burden for a special exception is to demonstrate compliance with any objective criteria in the ordinance applicable to that specific use. It is considered legislatively determined that the use is appropriate for the property. So the only way it is not to be permitted is if you can't meet the objective criteria, or if objectors were to show up and demonstrate that your use would have a greater detrimental impact than a typical use of that category. Here, somebody would have to show that for some reason our trucking terminal would have a greater detrimental impact than a typical trucking terminal. Your ordinance does not actually provide any objective criteria for a trucking terminal. So really, under the legal standard, that resorts back to that general burden. Since it is considered legislatively to have been an appropriate use, somebody really would have to come in and demonstrate that we would are proposing a greater detrimental impact to public health, safety, and welfare than a typical trucking terminal. Our use is pretty straightforward, and my clients are doing this really up and down the East Coast. They will clean up the place, they will go through land development, and it's really a storage facility for trucking equipment. So you will have, as you can see on the plan, a number of spaces that are designated for the rigs, otherwise known as bobtails, and those spaces are leased. And the leasing here can occur either on an individual basis, or it can, a company may lease half of the facility, the entire facility. But the use doesn't change. It's just a matter of who's really paying the bills and how it's organized. So you will have spaces that are simply for bobtails. So somebody will park their rig and leave it there until they need it again to park in their own personal vehicle. Or there's also trailer spaces here where somebody may pull in, drop their trailer, and leave with their rig, or their rig may actually go into a rig space. These spaces can also accommodate sprinter vans. So it's really for entities or people who have this type of machinery that they don't have anywhere to park, either at their existing facility, or if somebody's an independent driver can't park their rig at their home within the township. Those are the different types of clientele that would be interested in this type of facility. In addition to the basic storage of the bobtails, as well as the trailers or the sprinter vans, these facilities typically will have a maintenance and car wash facility associated with them, so that maintenance can be done on the vehicle while they're being stored, or they can be cleaned and serviced before they head back out onto the road. As I mentioned, we will have to go through the land development process. After this is all done, during that land development process, we will obviously have to deal with the various area and bulk requirements. We'll deal with the zoning officer in achieving compliance with any of that. Today, the facility just kind of runs haphazard around the property. Almost the entirety of the 6 acres is covered in some sort of impervious coverage. with no stormwater management, this facility, when we go through land development, will be required to upgrade to provide stormwater management that is not there today. One thing of note on the plan, there's an existing driveway that is currently offset from the IKEA headquarters, and our proposal right now is proposing to relocate that driveway so that it actually would align with the IKEA entrance, which will be a much safer, more fluid traffic movement. We do have a traffic engineer that during the land development process will have to study that intersection. We will have to demonstrate safe and efficient ingress and egress at that time during the land development process. So that is the basic concept of what we are here for. As I mentioned, simply a special exception. We're permitted use. We meet the general criteria. And I have with me Mr. Alex Tweedy from Corp, who can answer any questions that the board may have. If the board would permit me, I'd like to offer my introduction as an offer of proof, have Alex accept that, and then answer any questions that you might have.
That's fine. Have him be sworn in.
Say the full name, please, sir.
Alex Tweedy, T-W-E-E-D-I-E.
Raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that testimony about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Tweedy, with whom are you currently employed?
Landcore Engineering Consultants,
And about how long have you been employed by Landcore?
6 years.
And you're a licensed engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
I am.
And you're familiar with the property that's subject to this proceeding, 407 Allenwood Road?
Yes, I am.
And the plan that I identified that's to your left on the board, that was prepared by you or at your direction?
It was.
And am I correct that you have previously testified before municipal bodies, including zoning hearing boards?
I have.
And in those proceedings, were you accepted as an expert in civil engineering?
I have.
I'd like to offer Mr. Tweedy as an expert in civil engineering.
We have no objection.
That's fine. Mr. Tweedy, you heard my rambling introduction this evening describing the existing conditions of 407 Allenwood Road as well as the proposed redevelopment of 407 Allenwood Road. If you were called to testify to the facts that I presented to the board this evening, would you testify to those facts as I presented them to the board?
Yes, they're an accurate representation of existing and proposed conditions.
Any additions or deletions to those facts?
I believe you covered all the facts.
Excellent. Mr. Tweedy, based on those facts, I represented certain conclusions to the board, including compliance with any outstanding objective criteria, as well as the general criteria for a special exception for a trucking terminal. If you were called to specifically testify to those conclusions, would you testify to those conclusions as I have presented them to the board this evening?
Yes, I would.
Any additions or corrections to those conclusions?
No.
Mr. Tweedy, generally speaking, is it your opinion that the proposed use is consistent with a trucking terminal as permitted by special exception in the Resource Recovery District?
Yes.
Any reason to believe that the proposed use would have a greater detrimental impact to the public health, safety, and welfare than would a typical trucking terminal?
No, it would not.
That's all I have for Mr. Tweedy.
All right, thank you. And is that your sole witness?
That is.
All right, thank you.
I do have representatives of Simi Capital here in case there are questions that I was unable to answer this evening. I don't intend to call them on direct.
All right, thank you. Ms. Pagat, do you have any questions?
Yes. Are there similar use trucking terminals in the area that you're aware of?
I am not. I certainly have not participated in one. I know this is an expanding use. It is something that is occurring more and more because of last mile delivery and so much more online shipping and retail. But I have not participated in one, and I don't know of one in Plymouth Township that operates in this manner.
So this is sort of like a new idea?
I don't think it's a new idea in general, but I think it's a new concept coming through.
Okay. If you were approved, would the terminal be staffed by security or any kind of workforce?
And thank you for mentioning that. It's important to note I did not mention in my opening. This is a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days facility. It is secure, so there is security on site at all times, but a driver is able to come to the site at any hour to pick up the rig or the trailer and depart. As you would expect, many of these drivers are not anticipating or not intending to drive at peak periods. You don't want to be on the road, particularly not in that area, at 8:30 in the morning or 5:30 at night if you can avoid it. So oftentimes these drivers are non-peak. And if I may, just to expand on that, when we went to the Planning Commission obviously recommended approval this evening, but one or two questions came up during that proceeding that I think are important to put on the record. One, although our parking spaces here can accommodate sleeper cabins, and they may park there, sleeping in those cabins is prohibited. So there will not be people sleeping in their rigs at this site. So that is not going to occur on site, and that was asked at the Planning Commission. And the second was whether or not we envision having underground storage tanks for the maintenance facilities and so forth. And we do not anticipate having any underground storage tanks for any materials for that maintenance facility and or wash area. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this going to be, or intended to be an RV parking lot too?
No, it is not.
Okay.
These are commercial vehicles, not personal recreational vehicles.
Okay, and what kind of security will there be for ingress and, perimeter?
It will be a fully gated facility. There may even, depending how it is leased out, it's possible that there are multiple gates inside. For example, as you see it laid out right now by Mr. Tweedy, there's the ability to really kind of split it down the middle, have one operator kind of lease the right-hand facility and the second left. So there would be gated entry on either side. The entire facility will be secure.
Video surveillance and things like that?
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Will there be, the use as a truck or vehicle terminal increase air or noise pollution in the area?
Compared to the existing use, no, it will not.
Okay. Okay. Do you have another about or are there any potential environmental concerns, remaining solvents or anything like that from the current metals recycling plant?
Yeah, interesting you asked that because during the Planning Commission, the question came up about the underground storage tanks, and the response there was, we're more concerned about the existing condition than we are what we will do to it. So obviously my clients, as they go through the process of purchasing the property, are going to have to do full environmental analysis, phase 1, likely phase 2 environmental analysis to see what is there, what environmental contaminants may or may not exist, and deal with those accordingly before they move on to the site.
Okay, thank you. Those were all my questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Aprile?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions, and let's keep going on the environmental issues. When you put a car wash and a repair shop in, what kind of environmental safeguards will you have in place?
I don't know that we have gotten into the exact details of the car wash facility, but it will have to be reviewed during land development by the township engineer. I know that having done car wash facilities, standalone car wash facilities, there's great concern about the gray water, how the gray water is handled, whether or not that gray water is recycled through the car wash facility. So we will have to attend to that, all of that during the land development process.
So they don't have those plans yet?
We have not. It's possible that this facility will not have a maintenance facility or a car wash, but we have shown it because it's obviously always easier to take a building off of a special exception plan than it is to try and add it later. It will really depend on the demand for the parking versus the maintenance facility. Like next door, for example, Danella has his own vehicles and he has his own maintenance facility. They knew exactly what they wanted. We don't have a specific tenant. This may very well be all trailers and rigs, but if an individual tenant comes that wants to have a maintenance and wash facility, we wanted to make sure it was designated on the plan. So it would really be up to that individual tenant to design their maintenance and wash facility.
Okay. How about tankers? You said trailers and rigs. Are tankers in there?
No tankers would be on site.
No tankers are allowed. So we won't have any, crazy materials in the tanker. No hazard. Thank you.
And I'll state it for the record since they're not sworn. No hazardous materials.
No tankers.
No tankers or hazardous materials.
Okay. And just the last question. You said your driveways are going to be across from IKEA's corporate offices there?
Correct.
Are we putting a light there?
It is highly doubtful that we would meet
Signal.
warrants for that. But again, we have to submit during land development, we have to submit a complete traffic study. We have already engaged our traffic engineer who's performing that study. In all likelihood, we will not meet traffic warrants for a signal here. It's going to be generally a right turn in for the vehicles, so they won't be crossing traffic, and then a left turn out, which obviously is the easier movement for the larger rigs, making left turn out as opposed to making that right turn in. We don't anticipate any conflicts. This area is specifically designed, obviously, for heavy truck traffic. We obviously don't want people going down to the right. Don't want them going towards the proving grounds or trying to go down Brook Road. But all of our traffic is really going to be heading left and joining the heavy truck traffic that already exists down Allenwood Road. The new signal, obviously, at Allenwood and Ridge is critical also to the success of this facility.
No more questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Armando.
A couple quick questions. So right now, is pervious or impervious?
Almost the entire 6 acres right now is impervious.
It's paved.
It's a combination of gravel, pavement, building, whatever else they have put down over the years out there.
So is there any percentage concerns about impervious versus pervious, Mr. Conway?
Until I see a plan, like an actual, I don't think so after looking at that plan, because in that district, you're allowed like 80%.
Yeah, we're at
85%.
We're below that threshold.
Is there going to be a gas station in there?
There is not.
So it's strictly storage, maybe mechanical, maybe car wash?
Correct.
And would it be safe to assume that it would probably be 100% Amazon trucks?
No, it is. We do not have a tenant at this point, and we just built the Amazon facility, so I don't believe that they have any intention of using this facility.
So what would cause the need to have so many truckers? Like what are they hauling? Like
Do you guys want to give samples of one or two of your clients?
Yeah.
Why don't
All right, come on up. We need your name
Sworn
and
in.
yeah.
Of course. Sure.
Jacob Diamond. Jacob Diamond.
You have to have them sworn, sorry.
Spell your last name.
Diamond.
You solemnly swear or affirm that testimony about to give you this most truth or truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Diamond, you're authorized to speak on behalf of the applicant this evening.
Yes.
Okay. And a question was raised as to what types of entities may lease these types of facilities. Can you provide some examples as to the types of tenants that may lease these facilities?
Yeah, so, it's a medley of e-commerce type of users. So any type of truck that has to deliver goods, any type of materials, whatever it has to be from that location to their end user, it typically happens at more infill located areas. So these are mostly goods that are going to be stored. Some of these trailers may have nothing in there, could just be empty trailers being stored. We like to see these trailers taken off public roads and put them in, kind of enclosed gated areas where it's a little bit more safer environment to keep them. So
would they be UPS trucks, FedEx trucks, private drivers?
These are all
Amazon
good examples
contractors?
of typical, users that could be using it. FedEx, Amazon, trailers,
So it could be any company in the area that needs to store an extra truck.
Correct.
Could be individual. In some of their instances, they are done on an individual basis. The example I gave during my opening is, I remember growing up in a neighborhood, we had a rig driver that lived in my neighborhood. He's not allowed to park on his street. He can't park in his driveway, but he owns his rig. And so these facilities do provide that as an option, as somewhere that somebody can park that rig. They may be independently hired to then go pick up a trailer and do their drive. But this gives them a safe location to do that.
How many other of these facilities do you run?
Right now, we're working on about 7 or 8 of them around the country.
All right. Are they working on them? Or are they up and running?
One of them we had converted into a truck parking facility in Ohio. So that's up and running. The other ones are actually in the process.
All right. It's strictly rigs and hauling trucks, not Winnebagos.
Correct. Or sprint, but they can be sprinter vans, for last mile
But
delivery.
not
That-
residential type people, more trucking, business, hauling goods type of vehicles?
Correct.
And what percentage of the one you have up now is individual contractors versus one big client?
So one of them we helped convert into it, so I want to be clear that that one no longer, we don't own it anymore, but we converted it into a truck parking facility. That one was actually being leased to a truck parking facility tenant, who then would lease them out to individual truck, owners who would do the rides. So it's become very curated, where if I own a truck, there's now platforms where I can actually go and see a service and see a job. I can then say, okay, I'll take that job. I own my truck. They'll tell me where to go. I pick up my goods and I deliver to the end user. It's become very technical and
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple questions. Just,
Thanks, Jake. Of course.
what kind of lighting will be on this facility?
It will be in accordance with the township ordinance. Again, we have not developed a full lighting plan. It is obviously available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so it will need to be lit for security purposes as well as safety purposes. Again, in accordance with the ordinance, which is in a heavy industrial district is not typically a concern.
What type of, I know there's no residences there. What type of fence will you have on the perimeter?
A secure fence. It will depend when we get into land development, when Alex finishes his survey, as to what we can put in there. It obviously needs to protect the inventory. And I don't recall, Mr. Mattioni, whether or not we are permitted to have 8 feet or razor wire or barbed wire. If we are, that stuff may be there just to make sure that it remains secure. But that will all depend on what your ordinance permits.
And from an aesthetic point of view, I would prefer there not be
Understood.
a razor wire fence. It's...
I think the one thing to add, if you're familiar with the property, there is an existing tree line along Ellenwood Road. Obviously, there's going to be some rework of the entrance, so there'll be, a couple modifications along that frontage. But if you look at the design plan with the setbacks and kind of the layout of the site, and there's some slope to the property, we intend to maintain kind of as much of that screening material along the roadway as well. So from the street, we anticipate that the fence will be, inboard of that tree line. So obviously, the security is, 100% of the property perimeter. But as you know, we're on the one side, it's the storage facility, Donnell's property, the trash to steam plant. So I really assume from an aesthetic purpose, your concern is more along that Allenwood frontage. And our intention, obviously, short of the driveway work that we need to do, we're trying to maintain that existing tree buffer, which will help with any aesthetics of the facility and also screening of any fencing that's required. And it's nice and mature, and the trees are very tall.
Understood. It also goes to the Danella side because they've put a lot of money into their site. They've got a new building. They put a lot of money in there. I'm not sure that they want to look at a razor wire fence either.
I'll tell you this, Mr. Danella is my client. I did that facility, and if Mr. Danella does not like what we do here, I am sure I will hear.
Understood.
There's nobody that runs a,
putting the cart.
there's nobody that runs a cleaner operation than Mr. Danella.
No, it's a nice facility. It's just out there. Will there be battery chargers for electric trucks? I see a lot of fleet trucks now are electric powered.
It's possible, but I wouldn't say that would be the plan. Because there are now, with electric vehicles becoming very prevalent, there are the needs of having charging stations on these sites. I wouldn't say this specifically would be that type of setting.
Because I see that with the short run day trip truckers, and a lot of them are turning to electric trucks. So I could imagine if I'm getting a Sprinter truck in here and I'm doing deliveries during the day,
Possible.
and I'm parking it here at night because the township doesn't want me in the neighborhood, that I would want a place to charge up my truck so that it runs the next morning when I show up for work.
Certainly possible.
So what I don't see is anywhere to park a car, so that if I drop off my car
Yep.
Because I drive there and I pick up my truck to run my route for the day, where am I putting my car?
In your space where you are picking your rig up. So typically you're swapping them out.
So I pull my car in,
Pull your car in.
and then pull the car back in? Okay,
You
'cause-
rent that one spot, so it's either got your rig in it or your car.
oh, because they're awful large spots and, you know, cars
They are.
not that big, so. I was wondering how that worked. And you'll be 24/7 and, okay, and lighting. And you will have a gate?
Yes.
Okay. You'll replace the gate that's there?
Yes.
We're moving the whole thing.
It's being moved, so.
Right, so we need to replace
Anyway.
everything.
I have no further questions, Mr. Sander.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman,
Is
thanks.
there anyone from the public who'd like to speak in support of this application? Is there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to this application? I see no comments. Mr. Conroy, do you have any?
Just the fact that no razor wire is permitted in the township.
As
so-
I said, I was not sure
Well,
what
yes,
what you
and-
were permits.
And the whole barbed wire 1 foot above the fence is probably up for interpretation. It's getting late in the night. I don't know if I want to get into it, because it does say any,
There's land development.
well,
We will comply with your ordinance.
Rob, take a look at the ordinance, you'll see what I mean. Any use permitted in heavy industrial district is permitted in resource recovery. So if you look in section 1900, states barbed wire is permitted in the heavy industrial district. Love it, especially.
As I said,
I see an
we will
email
comply with your ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, before you just ask a follow-up
Yes,
question.
certainly, Mr. Daly.
Thank you. Just when we're talking about what's going to be parked there, it's going to be the rigs versus trailers, correct?
Both.
Oh, both. Okay.
Both are common,
Okay,
yes.
so in a common slot, in other words, you would get one, or it would be.
There are separated slots, there are designated trailer spaces and designated rig spaces.
Okay.
So somebody very well may have both, they would technically have two different spaces, but this accommodates both.
Okay.
Yeah, if you notice on the plan, there's 2 different size stalls, obviously. A bobtail fits in a much smaller space than the trailer. So
Okay.
Provide.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a whole number of 60-foot parking spaces.
Yeah.
That's a trailer.
Yeah. Okay, I see it.
I believe 30 versus 60, depending on what plan.
I see it. Okay, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any further questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant the special exception from the Township zoning ordinance number 342 as amended, Article 15, Section 1502, point capital E, to allow a truck terminal on the property located at 407 Allenwood Road in the Resource Recovery Zoning District. And there would be some additional conditions, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Daly, if you're of a mind to accept these conditions in your motion, the first would be that the applicant obtain final and unappealable land development approval from Plymouth Township. Secondly, that there will be no sleeping in any trucks on the site. Third, that there would be no underground storage tanks on the site, installed on the site. Fourth, that there will be no recreational vehicles permitted on the site, only commercial vehicles. Fifth, that there be no tanker trucks, no tankers allowed on the site. And finally, that there be no fueling station.
I'll accept those conditions.
Okay, do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Aprile. Let's have a vote. Ms. Pygott?
In favor?
Mr. Daly?
In favor.
Mr. Aprile?
In favor.
Mr. Raimondo?
In favor.
The chair votes in favor. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So four others. There was somebody similar. No, I know, I agree. The next and last case is 641 Old Elm Street.
I think it's from
Last week.
Mr. Solicitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the application of 641 Old Elm, LLC, and Mansion House Hotel, Inc., is the legal owner of the property. This is seeking first an appeal from the determination of the Plymouth Township zoning officer dated November 18, 2021, that additional off-street parking is required to account for a proposed deck. And in the alternative, variances from section 1700.D and 1700.D5 to allow parking spaces, 31 of them being on gravel, where 66 parking spaces are required to be on a permanently paved surface. Property here is located, as you may gather, at 641 Old Elm Street in the D residential zoning district.
Mr. Lewis.
Good evening again. For the record, Rob Lewis, Kaplan Stewart, and I represent 641 Old Hotel LLC. And the board has had a long evening. I will do my best to be direct here this evening, but our application is a little bit different than what you might see each and every day. My client is the equitable owner and lessee of the property located at 641 Old Elm Street. Obviously, that is the property that's the subject of the proceeding. I do have with me this evening.
The time is now 8:45, and the Greater Plymouth Community Center will be closing in 15 minutes.
It's off the record.
The time is now 8:45.
We don't.
And we'll be closing in 15 minutes.
We have had hard stops.
Try.
So.
Yeah, 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
I was about to say I do have with me this evening my client, Evan Lambert, who I will have testify, as well as my civil engineer, Joe Estock, who I think the board is very familiar with. So again, I will try a brief introduction. It will not be nearly as lengthy as my last one, because this will obviously require direct testimony from the two. But if I can, just try and mark my exhibits and address kind of the slightly different character of this application than what you might do. As I do and did earlier this evening, I handed you pre-marked exhibit packages, so I'll identify those as I go through. Property of the proceeding is 641 Old Elm Street. I've marked as Exhibit A1 simply a copy to the property. My client also has a right to purchase the property. As background, just for the board's knowledge, this is a project that has been in the works now for several years. My client has had a number of different proposals over time that we have approached the township on. Because it's an odd-shaped lot, it's a through lot that actually has frontage on Fulton as well as on Old Elm. There were talks about trying to proceed to do residential development, a whole host of different things. But my client throughout that time has been under lease with also the right to purchase the property ultimately from Bobby Haynes, the current owner. But I have included the latest lease as part of our exhibit package. Exhibit A2 is an existing features plan prepared by Joe Estock, and it's also on the board to my left, to the board's right. Applicant's Exhibit A3 is an aerial image of the property. As you can see in that aerial image and on the existing features plan, you may already be aware, property is improved with a 3-story masonry building. That building has a footprint of 1,766 square feet. The total floor area of that building is about 5,000 square feet. That building is commonly known as the Old Mansion House. Until recently, it was operated as a tavern and tap room, and it has been quite some time, but back in the day, there were actually apartments and rental rooms up on the upper floors. Property is located in the D residential zoning district, so the use as a restaurant tap room is a lawfully non-conforming use within that D residential zoning district. As you can see on the existing conditions plan, the property is also non-conforming with respect to a number of other area bulk requirements, one of which is what really brings us here tonight. But the nonconformities include the front yard setback, maximum impervious coverage, but most important to tonight, it's also non-conforming with respect to off-street parking. The Old Mansion House today is technically served by 5 designated parking spaces. And some of those parking spaces are even actually located within the right-of-way, so they are non-conforming in that respect as well. The rear of this property is a mixture of gravel, broken up macadam, various other surfaces that has served when necessary as overflow parking for the facility, but none of that rear yard is designated in any way as formal parking. So as of today, there really are 5 parking spaces serving a 5,000 square foot building, which the first floor of which operates as a restaurant. My client is in the restaurant business. My client owns and operates Savona Bar and Grill over in Gulf Mills. My client is proposing to reopen the restaurant here in a more upscale fashion than what it has been over the years, much like Savona. So bringing a beautiful restaurant here to Plymouth Township. That project will necessarily involve substantial renovation and remodeling, not only of the interior, but also of the exterior of the building, simply to make it compatible to that style and that quality of restaurant. All of that, obviously, he can do, and he can reopen the restaurant as he wishes. But what really is bringing us here tonight is the fact that my client is proposing to construct an approximately 1,000 to 1,500 square foot deck to the rear of that existing building. In conjunction with that deck and in conjunction with opening the restaurant itself, my client obviously proposes to improve that rear yard, to make it more usable, and proposes to regrade it, make it smoother, make it more accommodating, but to retain the gravel nature of that rear yard. We retained Mr. Estock to take a look at it, see what we can do, and Mr. Estock laid out a gravel parking field in the rear that otherwise complies with all of Plymouth Township's requirements in terms of drive aisle widths, parking stall sizes, things like that. And he's actually able to stripe that rear area once it's regraded and smoothly graveled to accommodate 31 additional parking spaces. I want to re-emphasize that those are parking spaces that comply with setbacks. Those are parking spaces that comply with stall size. This isn't just haphazardly throwing down striping in that rear yard. These parking spaces are not going to be right up against the property line compliant with the setback. With this latest plan, with those parking spaces, with the deck, we actually met with the township staff to determine what permits were necessary for the project to proceed. The client has been very eager to open this restaurant for about 2 years now, maybe more. It's pre-pandemic, I know that. And during those meetings, the township concluded that the building renovations, the grading, the gravel, could all be done through building permits and grading permits with the township. However, on November 18th of 2021, the zoning officer determined that the proposed deck triggered the need for additional off-street parking, and that parking, as you heard in an earlier application this evening, was at a ratio of 1 space for every 50 square feet, meaning that a 1,000 square foot deck would require 20 additional parking spaces, a 1,500 square foot deck would require 30 additional parking spaces. I have marked, and I think I didn't mention for the record, I'm sorry, A4 is the sketch plan, which is our proposal. A5 then is determination by your zoning officer.
Rob, 1,000 square foot deck would require 15 additional...
20.
20, I apologize, that's why I'm asking you. And 1,500 would require 30.
Correct. So the parking for the deck would all be in addition to the parking that's already required for the building itself, to which we are obviously already non-conforming. So before the board tonight are 2 very distinct requests that ultimately I believe the board may have to address independently, one at a time. The first is an appeal from that November 18th determination, and I'll get into that first. I submit to the board the facts are pretty straightforward. I don't think anybody disputes the numbers or what is being proposed, and I'll put a few more of those facts on the record. But I've marked as applicant's exhibit A6 if we need to follow all relevant provisions from Township zoning ordinance. Quite simply, the Plymouth Township zoning ordinance, as cited in the determination under sections 1700, point D.5, which I have included, provides that parking for a restaurant shall provide parking at a ratio of 1 space for every 50 square feet of gross leasable floor area. The ordinance then defines gross leasable floor area as the total floor area. The ordinance then defines floor area. Floor area under your ordinance, under the definitions in there, is the sum of the gross horizontal areas of all floors of a building measured from exterior walls or from the center line of the wall separating two buildings. The ordinance then defines a building. A building is a structure having enclosing walls and a roof intended for supporting or sheltering a use and occupancy and attached to the land. So, based on those very clear, very unambiguous terms, parking in Plymouth Township is calculated based upon gross floor area, which is calculated on space within a building. And a building is defined as having walls and a roof. In other words, a deck is clearly not a building, thus a deck does not constitute gross leasable floor area, and therefore is not subject to regulation by Section 1700 and does not independently require off-street parking. I submit to the board as the first part of our application this evening that that language is clear and that the determination that additional parking needs to be provided for the proposed deck is in error. And therefore, we have appealed that and asked that the board reverse the zoning determination and conclude that the addition of the deck does not require any additional parking. So that's step one. Should the board disagree with me and affirm the zoning officer's determination, we have applied this evening in the alternative to request a variance from Section 1700.D.5, and that is to permit the 36 parking spaces that we are proposing to serve the restaurant, including the deck. And as you'll note in the ordinance, if that provision is applicable, it requires that parking spaces for a commercial facility such as that they be paved. So our request for relief is also that they be permitted, 31 of those parking spaces be permitted to be located on gravel. Again, that is primarily to reduce the surfaces in this area. We have no intention of trying to pave this entire yard to the rear that has not previously been paved. We believe that the gravel will present a much better atmosphere for the rear and avoid all that unnecessary impervious surface. I do have with me, as I mentioned, two witnesses. I have my client, Mr. Lambert, but I also have Joe Estock, our civil engineer. So unless the board has any initial questions for me, particularly pertaining to that first item, the request for the appeal from the determination, if not, I will ask questions of Mr. Estock first.
I do believe your presentation is correct in that we have to make a determination whether a variance is required, and it's something that we have to decide now. When we should decide that is.
Well, I would listen to the whole case
Yes.
first, and then we can discuss it.
Excellent. Why don't I have Mr. Estock sworn?
State your full name, please, sir, for the record.
Joseph Estock, E-S-T-O-C-K.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony about to give in this matter the truth and whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Estock, with whom are you currently employed?
I'm self-employed, Joseph Estock, Consulting Engineers and Land Surveyors.
And Mr. Estock, you are a licensed engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, correct?
I am.
And for about how many years have you been a licensed engineer?
About 34 years.
And am I correct that you have previously testified for many municipal bodies, including this specific body, many times?
Numerous times, yes.
And in each of those instances, am I correct, you were accepted as an expert in civil engineering?
Yes.
Based on Mr. Estock's experience, I would ask, particularly before this board, to be accepted as an expert in civil engineering.
He will be accepted as we have in the past.
Thank you very much. Mr. Estock, I assume you're generally familiar with this property that's the subject of this proceeding this evening, 641 Old Elm Street?
I am.
Okay, and the plans that I previously identified is applicant's Exhibit A2, which was an existing features plan, and applicant's Exhibit A4, which was a sketch plan. Those were prepared by you or at your direction? They were. Okay. Joe, just using Exhibit A2 to the extent you need to, which you have here on the board, just in your own words, can you describe the property as it exists today?
I can. The property address is 641 Old Elm Street. It is a through lot, meaning it extends from Old Elm Street to Fulton Street. So it has a frontage on both Fulton Street and also Old Elm Street. The property has an area of about over 32,000 square feet, which is about 3/4 of an acre. Existing on the property is a 3-story, we're calling it a tap room, and with a small paved area in the front and the side and the rear, and a small stoned area to the back of the lot, but most of the rear of the lot is lawn.
And Mr. Esstock, do you know what zoning district that property is in today?
It is. It's in the D residential zoning district.
And the existing use, the tap room restaurant use, is that a permitted use in the D residential district?
It is not permitted.
Okay. And if you know the parking that exists today, is that sufficient under current ordinance standards to serve that restaurant use?
It really isn't. As I calculated, there's really no parking because there is 5 full spaces in the front of the building, but they are within the right-of-way, so normally you don't count them within the right-of-way.
Mr. Esstock, using applicant's Exhibit A4, which I believe is entitled Sketch Plan, can you just generally, in your own words, describe the proposed modifications to the property we are attempting to accomplish with those improvements?
Yeah, what we show here in the sketch plan is the striping of those 5 parking spaces in front of the tap room, 2 ADA parking stalls and 3 standard stalls. It also shows the addition of a deck to the rear of the tap room. This plan shows 1,500 square foot deck. And then an extension of that gravel parking lot in the rear with a loop circulation angled parking around the rear. What we show there are 31 parking spaces in that gravel lot and an area for a dumpster enclosure. What we did do is all of that gravel parking lot we kept away from the property lines to allow for a buffer on all sides.
And Mr. Esstock, the parking as you designed it, other than being on gravel, complies with Plymouth Township ordinances with respect to stall sizes and things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the standard parking stall size for both the angle parking stalls and the 90-degree parking stalls. The aisle widths are the standard Plymouth Township aisle widths.
Mr. Esstock, is there any topographical issues on site? Is there separation between our site and adjoining properties or adjoining roads?
It's relatively flat site, sloping to Fulton Street. However, it does sit above Fulton Street, so there's an embankment that leads down to Fulton Street.
And does the proposal propose any access to Fulton Street?
None.
No access to Fulton.
Correct.
And with the parking spaces that we're proposing in the gravel area, the total parking, if you include those in the right-of-way, is how many?
Yeah, we show 31 parking spaces on site, plus the 5 street parking spaces up front, which gives a total of 36.
And in your opinion, can additional parking fit on this property without zoning relief?
No, we cannot.
So we would have to seek additional zoning relief if we were to try and accomplish any additional parking on
Yeah,
site.
this was maximized, yes, so.
So even though there's a 5,000 square foot building that can currently be occupied as a restaurant on site today, the maximum number of parking spaces that can be accommodated on site is 36.
30 brought on site and 5 street parking, 36.
Yes, and so those are already economic.
Yes.
That's all I have right now for Mr. Esstock.
Okay, do you have anything?
Mr. Lambert? I think if I go through the testimony, it'll probably be easier for the board to then direct your question to whomever is more appropriate to answer.
Say your full name, please. for the-
Evan Lambert,
Spell your last name.
Lambert.
As your name, please, sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony about to give in this matter, truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lambert, am I correct that you're a principal of 641 Old Elm LLC?
Yes.
And you currently have a lease with the right to purchase the property that's subject to this proceedings?
Yes.
Am I also correct that you are proposing to reimagine and reconstitute a restaurant in this location?
Yes.
Do you have any experience in the restaurant industry?
Yes.
And very briefly, what is that experience?
I'm the founder, owner of Savona Restaurant for 25 years, located in Gulf Mills, Pennsylvania.
And I'm sorry, just to be clear, you said Savona, you've owned and operated that for 25 years?
25 years.
And just so the board understands what Savona is, if they haven't been there, can you describe Savona? How would you describe your restaurant?
Savona is an upscale fine dining restaurant with about 170 seats and features Italian cuisine with a world-class wine program, and has been recognized for that the last 25 years.
And in terms of the physical property, Savona, I believe, based on my knowledge, is similar to the property we're discussing tonight in that the parking lot for Savona is relatively small compared to the square footage and the capacity of the restaurant. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And, or at least from a zoning perspective, somebody would say that the parking lot is small for Savona, correct?
Definitely.
Any idea how many parking spaces exist at Savona today?
It's about 35 parking spaces.
35 parking spaces for a 170-seat restaurant.
Yes.
And are those 35 parking spaces sufficient to serve Savona?
Yes.
Explain to the board what it is that, or actually, let me step back. If and when those parking spaces aren't enough to serve your customers at Savona, do cars simply spill out onto the roads and park along the adjacent roadways?
No, the cars don't do that. Savona's located in an area that is public roadways. So there are times of the year, times of the week, where guests can park in the parking lot, and the parking lot is sufficient. And then there are times where we have valet parking and utilize the surface that we have on the parking lot for the cars to valet park.
I'm going to break that down into two components. Right now, Savona, the way it is located, has really no option for on-street parking, correct?
That is
There are
correct.
busy roads surrounding it, a traffic signal pretty close by, things like that, right?
Yes.
So no parking on the street. So you have to otherwise accommodate your patrons to make sure that you don't have a parking problem.
Absolutely.
They would otherwise either not be able to come to your restaurant or you'd have a serious issue, correct?
That's right.
And am I correct that you accommodate those patrons now on busy evenings by employing a mandatory valet service?
That is right.
And in your 25 years at Savona, have you ever had a parking problem at Savona?
No.
And so at Savona, you have been able to accommodate an upscale restaurant, award-winning restaurant, with 170 seats with 35 parking spaces, correct?
Yes.
So Evan, in your own words, describe what you envision for the old mansion.
Okay, so we plan to do a cosmetic renovation inside, and as Rob mentioned earlier, just refresh the exterior to make it nice and clean and presentable. And we plan to have approximately a 15-seat bar with about 30 seats in the first level. So we're really only talking about 30 seats and a 15-seat bar, about 45 seats inside on the first level. The second floor, the third floor, they'll be used just for offices and storage space. And then we would propose or are requesting to be able to put a deck on the back with about 40 seats and offer that for people to dine outdoors, especially during the pandemic, because so many people are interested in eating outside.
So to be clear, you're talking about approximately 30 to 35 seats inside plus a bar.
That's right.
That seats 15. And then the deck at roughly 1,000 to 1,500 square foot deck, you believe that'll also have an additional 35 to 40 seats, correct?
Yes.
And that deck, generally for seasonal dining, it's correct. In the pandemic, obviously seasons have been extended,
Right.
But it is intended really to be a seasonal dining area, correct?
Our intention is to be seasonal.
And will that deck have a roof and walls?
No.
Do you intend ultimately to screen that deck from view to provide privacy for your patrons?
Yes.
And so at some point, you intend to plant landscaping or do other cosmetic improvements that will screen that area for your patrons?
Yes, we have every intention to provide privacy.
And in part, that is also because of the atmosphere you intend to create for your clients, correct?
Exactly. It would serve our clients best.
Let's go back to parking for a minute. The plan that we marked as applicants Exhibit A4, as you heard Mr. Estock and myself talk about, ultimately provides parking accommodations for 36 cars. Based on your 25 years of experience in the industry, do you believe that those 36 parking spaces will be sufficient to serve this restaurant?
Definitely.
As you know, because we've been at this for a few years, there have been concerns expressed about the lack of parking in the neighborhood that surrounds this property.
Yes.
Most residents along Fulton, and I'm sorry I can't speak as to your home, but also along Elm struggle with parking. Along Fulton, most of those homes do not have garages. They do not have, many of them do not even have driveways. So much of the parking on Fulton, and I believe even some on Old Elm, is really accomplished by on-street parking. Do you believe that your restaurant, with 36 total parking spaces, will exacerbate those parking problems?
No.
In fact, are you concerned that your parking may become attractive to those area residents?
Yeah, I think our guests will have plenty of room to park in our parking lot, which would be most convenient for them. And yeah, I do have a concern in the back on Fulton that some of those people will actually try to park in our parking lot to, be close to their homes.
And so part of the reason we are not proposing any access to Fulton, among other things, which we had previously shown on other plans, is to make sure that, one, our patrons don't leave and go to Fulton, but also to ensure that the neighborhood residents don't make this into a public parking area, that it is reserved for your patrons.
Exactly.
Evan, at Savona, you implemented a valet system that we've spoken about. Do you have a fallback plan here, as you did at Savona, if you are wildly successful, and this is the greatest restaurant Plymouth and Conshohocken have ever seen, do you have a fallback plan here if that parking should occur?
Yes, I have a fallback plan.
And is that fallback plan to potentially implement a valet system here as well?
Absolutely. If there's a need for it, then we would implement the valet plan, and I asked Mr. Estock to develop that plan.
And the plan that Mr. Estock developed that you've seen for valet, how many vehicles can be accommodated on site with that plan?
Even with all the setbacks and everything, if I'm correct, 87 parking spaces.
And those 87 vehicles that could be accommodated, that's done in the same footprint of the gravel parking area that we previously discussed that would typically only accommodate 36 parking spaces, correct?
Yes.
So those 87 cars wouldn't be intruding further into setbacks or getting closer to homes. It would all be accomplished within that existing footprint, correct?
Yes.
Evan, if you were to implement a valet plan because you are wildly successful, I assume, like Savona, it would be free to patrons and would be mandatory, correct?
Free to patrons, mandatory, yes.
And that's because if it's not mandatory, it just doesn't work, right? You can't.
It has to be mandatory.
Excellent. So, Evan, putting aside for the moment our appeal that I discussed at the outset from the determination, as we believe the ordinance doesn't actually require any additional parking, in the alternative, we have requested a variance to permit 36 spaces to serve the restaurant where 66 spaces are required, and to allow 31 of those parking spaces to be within that rear gravel lot. In your opinion, are those 36 spaces sufficient to serve your proposed restaurant?
Absolutely.
And Mr. Lambert, if the board is inclined to grant a variance rather than the appeal, do you believe that the granting of that variance, or technically variances, they're both in the same section, would have a detrimental impact on the public health, safety, or welfare?
No.
And that's because you believe that the parking is sufficient and all parking for your use can be accommodated on site?
100%.
Evan, the request for variances, is that based on physical limitations of the property? In other words, you can't provide any additional parking, correct?
Correct.
And the building as it sits today is already a restaurant and is already 5,000 square feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And do you believe that we have minimized the extent of that request for relief? In other words, have we maximized parking absent asking for variances?
Yes.
That's all I have for Mr. Lambert.
Thank you.
Obviously, in case I need to ask him any more questions, I'll reserve the right to do so, but see what the board has.
Those are your two witnesses.
Two witnesses, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's have questions from the board. Ms. Pagat?
Yes, I have a question. Just thinking about adding that proposed deck. I noticed when I drove past the property, there were residences very, like, it appears to be within a few feet of your building.
Yes.
So by adding that deck in the summertime or whenever it's being used, if you had a full house out there, 45 people, do you think that it would be a nuisance to the neighbors who live so close to that, to that deck? It looks like it's right,
Yeah, it's close. It's not butted up right against their property. There's a little setback, and we plan to put some kind of privacy wall or some kind of privacy partition there.
So with everybody having conversations, you don't think the chatter would be loud enough to be a nuisance?
I don't believe so.
It sounds like a good project, but the other thing I was thinking, as a tenant, are you allowed to make structural changes?
Yes.
To a built as a tenant?
Yes.
Ms. Pagat, this has been, this tenant situation is a little bit unique in the sense that my client also has the right to purchase the property ultimately. And it's
Yeah, I know that. I heard you say that, but I know he didn't purchase it yet, so.
That's correct.
I know,
No, we have the right to make changes, but there's really nothing structural. It's all cosmetic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have several questions. Actually, one is just semi-comment directed toward your argument, Mr. Lewis, that saying the deck is not really a part of the building. It says under definition of building includes structure. It shall be construed as if followed by the words or parts thereof. So would not a deck be a part thereof?
I believe that the entire definition requires it to be a structure having, so the structure must have enclosing walls and a roof to constitute a building. So that those three elements are all necessary before you get to part of a building. So again, yes, I think you can have part of a building, but I think the ordinance is pretty clear that to be a building, it has to have a roof and walls.
Okay, we've seen this kind of thing before, though, in with some other cases where there was an argument that an apartment building, a multi-use apartment building was like a what do you call it, a continuing care facility. That's sort of different. So it seems to me this to be something of a gray area. I think we probably have to determine separately. I guess the question is there enough? It seems to me it's a fairly sizable lot running back towards Fulton, and so even if you were put on a deck, it seemed to me there might be enough physical space for parking spaces above 31 in that area. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Estock, I think testified, but I'll let him follow up.
No, that was the maximum we could put in the rear.
Okay.
But the one thing that really limited us, we wanted to preserve a buffer around the residential properties on all the sides too.
Okay.
So there's no encroachment of that buffer. We could put landscaping and screening. And it's about 18 feet away from the property line. So that's the reason we're limited to 31.
Okay, 18 feet off the property line all the way
Yes,
around.
yeah.
Okay. How about So, there seems to be a question too about whether it'd be gravel or all-weather surface. Is there any difference in the number of parking spots you accommodate either one of those, or is that?
No, the gravel versus all-weather surface is really to limit any stormwater runoff and to eliminate the need for the macadam and impervious surfaces, things of that nature, and quite frankly, to make it a feasible project. When you get into trying to pave that entire lot, putting in all the necessary stormwater management that would come along with all of that, really the project is no longer feasible from a financial standpoint. So we have, from the outset, proposed this as a gravel lot in the rear.
Yeah, when I think of gravel, I mean, I tend to think of something that's crunchy and somewhat loose. In this case, that doesn't seem to be the case.
It will certainly get compacted over time. The bigger concern typically with a gravel parking field is that when you strike the spaces, that they start to fade away and what have you. So here it will be a maintenance issue. We will have to make sure that those spaces remain clearly marked on that gravel so that we retain all 31 of those spaces in the rear. And that just becomes a maintenance issue for Mr. Lambert.
As at Savona, would you consider making valet parking the default?
So what we have spoken about to council, their workshop, as well as to the planning commission, would be that if it is warranted, if we find that we are filling up the parking, Friday nights or Saturday nights, that then we would agree to implement a valet service on those busy times. The vast majority, as Mr. Lambert stated, the vast majority of days, the vast majority of times, we have no question there's going to be plenty of open parking back there. Lunch times and brunch times, things like that. It's never going to be an issue. So it would not make sense to try and say it's valet at all times the restaurant is open. It would only need potentially to have that fallback, to have a valet system if he's very successful and those Friday and Saturday nights or peak periods are busy. And that's what we have said that he's willing to implement.
And is the valet system intrinsically limited to the space behind the restaurant, or would you have an overspill lot somewhere? Of course, that would probably involve leasing another property.
Correct. And again, Mr. Essock developed a plan that Mr. Lambert has signed off on that accommodates 87 vehicles on site, which obviously is more than enough for anything that could potentially occur here, even in his wildest dreams. And so there's no real need then to try and valet off-site and find leasable space somewhere else to do that. It's easier to simply accommodate it on site.
What would that involve? Parking vehicles above the 31 spaces along the margin, or
No, it actually all, as was testified to, it actually all gets accomplished on that same footprint. And why don't I mark this then as for demonstrative purposes so you can see it. This will mark as A7, Mr. Sanders.
That makes sense.
Okay. This is how you accommodate 87 parked vehicles through a valet program. You could never do this letting people park their own vehicles. But you'll notice it is all within that exact same footprint as the 31 parking spaces. But again, that's only done through valet. You would never let people park their own vehicles and accomplish that.
And are you doing with the already striped parking spaces, or is that oh, sorry, that's it.
So the already striped spaces would remain, so that, most of the time you're there, you're doing that, but on a Friday night, the valet service knows how to park the cars, and they would ignore the striping spaces. Again, because it's mandatory, you don't have a conflict between the valet service and individual patrons. It becomes a mandatory service.
I understand, okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you both.
Mr. Aprile.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This place is not open, right?
It is not currently open. It was until, year and a half, 2 years ago?
Year and a half ago.
So to open it, you got to get a use variance?
No.
It already has that?
It is legally non-conforming. It is a restaurant, and we are permitted to retain it as a restaurant.
Okay.
The use is not in question. We are permitted.
So by right, what could you open here right now?
5,000 square foot restaurant.
5,000, all 3 floors?
All 3 floors.
And how much parking do you need?
If you did 5,000, under your ordinance, you would need 100 parking spaces.
You have 100 parking spaces?
Nope. We have 5.
So you can't open it as a 5,000 square foot restaurant?
No, we are legally non-conforming, so technically we can open it today.
And without a parking variance?
Correct.
Because it's legally non-conforming?
That's correct.
So why are you here?
Because we are adding a deck, which was determined by the zoning officer to trigger additional parking. And we can't provide that additional parking.
So there's no dining on 2 and 3, just on 1, right?
Correct.
And based on this, on the tap room is 1755 square foot?
That's 1766. Yeah, it's hard to read down there.
That's 36 spots, right? 36 parcels? Is that what that number is?
Yes. Find out further than went out back.
No, the requirement.
The requirement for just the restaurant would
Just
be
the tap room,
36.
just the tap room. First floor.
Approximately, I believe so.
Okay, and then you put on a deck and they want 30 more, right?
Correct.
1,500 square foot deck, right?
Correct.
So will this deck have any kind of tents on it, heaters, stuff like that? Or it's just gonna be a wide open deck?
It'll be a wide open deck. We might provide some heaters during some of those a little bit colder months, but no roof, no walls, just an open deck.
So if it rains, you're closed outside?
Yeah, that's basically right.
Okay. And then, in this parking lot, pretty big lot, what kind of buffers are you gonna put on the outskirts?
Ultimately, it's going to be up to Mr. Lambert what he plants. It's going to be buffering around that perimeter, but we're trying to minimize the extent of what all gets done along that perimeter. Our focus will be on screening the deck from the adjoining residences, because obviously that's the concern, really, is having patrons sitting next to their home and them sitting next to, having to sit next to our restaurant. So that's really where our Mr. Lambert's focus is going to be, providing ample screening and buffering in that location.
So you won't mind sitting out on your front porch looking at a parking lot? What about all these people on Fulton Street? Aren't they, isn't that their front street?
Yeah, across the road, yeah.
Well, they're looking at an empty field now, right?
It's a parking lot technically today, or parking accomplished there today. It's not a formalized lot.
Yeah, right. Who are these cars? Are these restaurant cars here?
No. So those parking spaces were recently added by Plymouth Township. Plymouth Township, in its effort to assist Fulton with all of their parking problems, was out looking for parking spaces to accommodate the problem on Fulton.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever been back there, but the houses don't have garages. Most of them have driveways. So everyone has to park on the street.
So are these parking spots on this property?
They are not. They are in the right-of-way of Fulton. And so the township built those parking spaces within the last 2 years. They went out and did some
I
great.
think I remember that, about something like that. Okay. So your parking's gonna be on the inside of that, and you're gonna buffer it somehow. We don't know how. And if you stripe it, you get 30 spots, and if you use valet service, you get 80 spots.
31 and 87, but just.
87, yeah, I know, I'm just.
87 vehicles, yeah, but 31 spot.
No more questions, thank you.
Mr. Armando.
A couple quick questions. Like, so you're saying build a wall in between the home and the deck to bring, what kind of wall?
Maybe some type of wooden structure that would make sure that any kind of noise would be buffered, and the residents on that side would be.
Like a solid?
We want the residents to be happy, otherwise we.
Right, but I mean, like, you won't be able to see through it?
No.
It would be like what, like
More like a
wood?
privacy fence.
Like a
correct?
privacy, yes, like a privacy fence,
Okay.
probably made out of some kind of.
What type of hours are we talking? Like, would there be a curfew for the deck?
We'd be open 7 days a week. During the weekdays, the kitchen closes at 9. On the weekends, we close at 10, and we usually stay open until the last customer leaves. But in our restaurants for 25 years, we have fine wine, and people aren't lingering very much past the time that they eat.
So
They're
like,
not sitting at the bar
what would be the
for
latest you
hours.
would see somebody out on the deck?
It's hard to say.
10, 11 at the latest, is that what you're saying?
Somewhere around. It's possible. It really depends on the day.
Right.
Okay? On
Like
Monday,
worst case
not even
scenario,
close.
like worst, like the busiest day, that the
Right.
latest night.
Friday night or Saturday night, if someone came in late and they ate dinner at 10 o'clock when the kitchen closes, maybe they'd be there an hour to an hour and a half for a table of 4. They'd be there till 11 or 11:30.
And when you say seasonal, what are you thinking? Like,
Well, in terms of
like November to like one.
Oh, you
like,
mean with the deck
yeah,
would be open?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I would say probably somewhere in the middle of April, start to get warm enough where some nights people want to sit outside. May, June, July, August, into September, maybe in the beginning of October if we're lucky. And that's when we might use some heaters just to buffer, but you can't use them for that long because people will be uncomfortable.
And the concept as far as is going to be the same as Savona, you think? The wine list and all that good stuff?
No, well, just to put things into perspective, this is a tiny restaurant compared. This room has 50 seats in it right now. So
Right.
between 30 inside and 30 outside, right here on the deck and the inside, if you put one more row of seats,
Right.
and this is a bar, would be the entire operation we're talking about.
Right.
By the way, with 3/4 of an acre of parking that has 18 feet of buffering all around it. So it's kind of like, there's just no way we're gonna need that much
So what's the concept as far? Is it going to be still?
It'll be an
upscale?
Italian restaurant. We'll have a brick oven with a wood-fired oven. We'll serve regional Italian food that's well made. I have chefs there are 5 people at Savona that worked at the Culinary Institute of America that are existing right now. I founded the American Sommelier Association personally in 1997. Savona has had the largest wine list in the state of Pennsylvania, over 1,200 selections. More wine than
So
any
you're
other
bringing
restaurant.
bringing that concept.
We're going to bring a little micro version of that there, where we have a great wine list that have been selected by master sommeliers, and do a nice, casually sophisticated restaurant there. As Rob said, we had been there for 25 years and had never had any problems in 25 years with alcohol, complaining, neighbors, zero.
Gotcha. Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Guess the question I have is, do you have an outdoor deck at Savona?
We actually, I wasn't going to bring it up because it would be, we added a 3,000 square foot deck in the same exact parking facility. So what we've been doing for 23 and a half years, was encumbered by a 3,000 square foot deck, and we still park the cars there and added 100 seats outside. It houses 100 people.
I do have some concern. I had dinner at Jasper's Backyard in Conshohocken recently, and I sat in the deck where they have a roof and heaters so they can use it all year long.
Yes.
And, what's to stop you from doing that here?
Well, we won't have a roof.
And what's to stop you from putting one on? Because they didn't have a roof when they originally did it, and then they
Zoning
decided...
ordinance wouldn't- it depends how it turns out, right? If
With
you
no
were-
walls. Roof, but no walls. I think the definition
It has
says
to have
roof
a-
and walls, right?
It's true.
So, anyway, and I wasn't clear on your days and hours of operation.
We'd be open 7 days a week, maximally for lunch and dinner. We are at Savona 7 days a week, lunch and dinner. I'm really not sure I plan to do that 100%, but I would say that, let's start there, because it's an open business, an open restaurant. If we can fill it, then we will. But lunches are a lot less busy than dinner.
And will you have lights in the parking lot?
Yeah, we'll have some minimal lights, but plan to put them very low so that they do not shine into the neighbor's yard.
And I see you've got this dumpster way in the back of the parking area. Why do you have the dumpster so far from the restaurant? It just doesn't
Keep it
seem
away from
practical
our
to me.
neighbors.
But it's actually closer to the neighbors, though, because you put it way back here, then it's closer to the people on Fulton Street.
The people on Fulton have at least a full right-of-way plus a grade change between them, whereas if we were to put it immediately behind our restaurant, not only would it be immediately next to our deck, it would be right in their backyard. So it is certainly, from that perspective, much better to put it up against our commercial neighbor and towards the rear of the property, it can still be screened out there, but it won't intrude into our most proximate neighbor's backyard.
You could have it closer up here along where Allenwood Park is and have it in the enclosure and be closer to the building, because I could see it running all the way out there to the dumpster way out in the back. It just doesn't seem necessarily practical to me.
I believe, and Joe, can you address whether or not that location also had something to do with the ability to service?
The reason it's located there too, if you look at that last aisle, the truck can pull up to the dumpster, load the dumpsters, and then back and go around. So it's nice to have the ability to have the truck pull right up into the dumpster area.
And again, you said you're only going to have an office and something else upstairs?
Yeah, as we plan at the moment, well, second floor would be offices, and the third floor would be storage. The dumpster, by the way, was really just to think about the most convenient, less, to have the least impact on the neighbors. That's what we thought. Can we move it? We could move it. There's no, it is inconvenient for it to be all the way back there. But we don't want the neighbors to smell the garbage. And if you know the street, there, as Mr. Lewis said, there's a big street in between, and then there's a little hill. So they're really protected from that area.
I wouldn't describe Fulton Street as a big street.
Okay.
I think that's a stretch.
There's a street.
It's a very narrow street, and it's difficult to navigate when I was back there. It's because you got the parking, the street, and then the houses. It's not a big street.
It's a tight community.
Yes, it is. It is very tight back there. I have no further questions at this time, Mr. Sander.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Would the public like to speak in regard to this application? If you want to come on up and be sworn in and.
I don't want to jump in front of anybody. My name is Lavonne, Lavonne, Gregory, G-R-E-G-O-R-Y.
Raise your right hand, you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony that you give in this matter, truth and truth, and truth, nothing but
Yes.
Gregory, what's your address, please?
631 Old Elm Street.
Ms. Gregory, can we just identify, just so everyone's aware, this is what I marked as a showing the restaurant, and so it looks as though you are the fourth.
Yes, this is two twins that are right up against the property line.
Mm-hmm.
They're
very narrow lots, no question about
You can reach out and touch one house next
Yep.
to each one. So I'm 4 doors away from the property.
Gotcha.
Just want the board to know.
Do you want to? Go ahead. Okay. So I have numerous concerns.
Sure.
And I did come to the council workshop, and they actually invited us to speak because they knew that's why we were there. So we brought up a lot of these issues already with the gentleman here. We wanted to let them know at that council meeting that we would like to see something go in there, obviously, but not to the detriment of the people that live there. Can I share some pictures, some photos with you guys? Okay. So this is, and you kept talking.
Speak over your shoulder.
They keep talking about Fulton Street, which I understand is an issue. We live on Old Elm, which is the same street as the property that we're talking about. There is already no parking. There's not enough parking for the people that actually live on Old Elm Street. Back in the day when the homes were first built, people didn't have cars, or they only had one car if they were lucky, right? It wasn't an issue. Times have changed. People have 2 and 3 vehicles. People that live on the end here, I think they have like 3 or 4 vehicles because now all of their kids are driving. So,
Is that Fulton or Old Elm?
This is Old Elm. Here's the mansion house. Do you see how the cars are parking already? They're parking in your right-of-way here. They're parking going back into your driveway.
No, I've been out there. I've seen it.
And we can only park on one side of the street. And it's a dead-end street. It's a little U, it's shaped like a U. So we can't drive around. If someone takes our parking spots, there are no other streets for us to drive around to try and find a parking spot on. They don't exist. This is in front of the mansion house. It's not even parking. They're parking on grass.
and there's an embankment there. Here you can see, this is the entrance to go back to their parking lot. People are parking there already. You're not even going to be able to get your people in the parking lot. So people are parking there. And then this is just looking at the street. This is all of the homes. You can see they're twins. Shared driveway here. But all of these houses, they're like 3 vehicles. I would say average of 3 vehicles. And then you can see why we can't park on the other side of the street, because there's no parking. There's nothing here. This is actually Tornetta's. We can't park on its grass.
That's stone building, right?
Yeah. This goes to his property, which is sitting back here. You just can't see it. And then you can see it says no outlet. So there's nowhere else for us to park. That's it. There's one side of the street. Which leads me to your valet, which is a great idea, but you can't force people to valet park their cars. All it takes is one vehicle to not park in the back lot, and you've already, where are we going? Where are we going to park? So, I don't know if you guys want to share those pictures.
Or is the mansion house even open at this point?
So they haven't been open for,
I mean, these pictures.
no,
These are all
people,
residents.
this is all residents.
None of this is related to the mansion house. This is
No.
already neighborhood parking.
And the mansion house has not been open for years. They were open like a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe one night a week, because they had people there shooting pool. It was like a pool league, but for the most part, they have not been open for years. I've lived there for 33 years. My father used to be friends with the Hayneses, the parents, when they owned it. It was a working man's bar when the steel plant was in operation. They would close at 7 o'clock at night. People would come over for home cooked meals. They would leave. They all parked in the back. Everybody knew to park in the back. As far as the legal nonconformity for the second and third floor, that was, I believe, grandfathered in a long time ago as a hotel. So you had so many. I forget how many rooms were up there, 4 or 6 maybe. The truckers that would come and pick up the steel would rent them. Okay? That's what that was used for. It was a nightly rental. So there was no parking. The truckers would park over at the steel plant and walk over, eat, get something to drink, and they'd get a good night's sleep and a shower. So that was grandfathered in many, many years ago.
And I don't think they're talking about bringing that back.
No.
Well, maybe the guys from my other application will stay here and I don't think so.
And then we got the whole issue with the deck.
Yeah.
So that's the parking issue. Then we have the deck. We're very, very tight. We already, and this is not your issue, but about 5 or 7, maybe like 5-7 years ago, they redid the Blue Route Bridge there.
Right.
And they took down the sound barriers on our side of the bridge, and they put them on the Conshohocken side. So now all of that noise bounces over. If you come down there and get out of your car and stand out front, we can't even sit on our front porch now. It's that loud. So we have our little sanctuaries in our backyards, and now you're going to have, the potential noise and the loss of privacy. We won't be able to sleep with our windows open. We went through this when the mansion house was open 1 or 2 nights a week. The dumpster was probably moved. If you moved it, great. Leave it back there, because they would come out and sling bags of bottles, beer bottles, in the dumpster at 2 o'clock in the morning when they were closing. We would hear that in our bedrooms. So people block our driveways. There's 2 driveways. There's a shared driveway and 1 other driveway. We would have to call the police because they don't use the back parking lot. They park, and then if they can't fit into a parking spot, they block our driveway. So we would have to call the police. The police were getting tired of us calling. The noise, we would call about the noise. People in the back lot talking, it goes right into our windows if we have them open. So it's a big concern for all of us that live down there.
Understood. Thank you.
Linda, EEL, INDA, Godowski, CAD,
I agree 100% with what my neighbor just said. I do want to say that Savona sounds like a very nice place, but you keep comparing Savona with what you want to see happen at 641 Old Elm. Savona, you have, if I'm understanding this correctly, you have a parking lot and you also have valet services.
Correct.
There is no option for street parking, so you don't have a street parking situation there, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So 641 Old Elm, you have an idea for your parking back there, and you said if you decide that valet parking is needed, you will determine that.
Right.
How will you know if valet parking is needed or not? Because how will you know that your customers coming into the restaurant have not already parked in our neighborhood?
We wouldn't be able to know that, however, we would assume that those people are going to park in a much more convenient place than to park down the road in front of a house 4 or 5 houses away.
Well, what
They're
about
gonna
those of
park
us?
in the
Penny,
lot.
he needs to finish.
Yeah.
What about those of us that live 2 and 3 doors away? That's not down the block, that's right there.
Yeah, there isn't a way for us to do that. Maybe we could have a sign there that says resident parking only, and that way people can see it and get routed into the back. I don't know if that's possible, and just something that I thought of to help the situation out, because we want everybody to be happy there.
Have a permit?
That's something that you mentioned the other day when we spoke as a possible idea. Maybe you want to offer that so that they can hear what you suggested.
Probably illegal to park there.
If my memory serves me right, I think that there was a sign that was put up, and for whatever reason, it was taken down a very short time after it was posted.
Would that help you if there was a sign that said resident parking only and deter people from parking in front of the
That has to be done by the township. We can't.
Right, it has to be done by the township, and the police, we're not even sure if they can enforce that.
Okay, I'm just trying to.
And I understand, I hear what's the conversation here, that you said it's public parking, we understand that, but it's
I'm not saying that in
our
a joyous, happy way, I'm saying
it's
that
our only
sort
resident
of-
parking, and we
yeah.
have no other streets to go to in order to park. Like, if those spots are taken, there is nowhere else for us to go.
I appreciate that. I guess one of the problems I have is if they weren't proposing a deck, they'd be able to open. And we couldn't stop them, we couldn't do anything about it. They could open.
No, and we'd be calling the police again.
I'm saying they could open without putting parking in the back. They could open 5 spaces out front. I don't know that it would necessarily work from a business perspective, there's so many parking, and you'd have a problem. But they could do that. So it's the deck that triggers, and we have to decide that, but the deck that triggers them having to be here, because they could open as a legal non-conforming use and not have to put the parking in the back. So that's the part of the conundrum we have. Then we have another problem of a building sitting there vacant that really needs to be activated somehow. Whether it should be a restaurant is another issue, and what it should be, but it's got the long-standing history as a restaurant, so we've got those issues to think through. It's a difficult situation. I've been there numerous times. I see the parking. I mean, it's a problem. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Could Mr. Lambert put on his website any literature that he has saying that parking, do not park on Old Elm or Fulton, please pull into our parking lot.
That stuff's easy to do.
And have some, well, but as part of, if the board is of a mind to grant relief, we want to try to help these folks out as much as possible. And if you're required to have signage that says blank, name of new restaurant, parking here with an arrow, and you publicize that, because when I go to a restaurant, a lot of times I'll look on their website and I always look for where to park, in Philly, wherever. And, that helps to know that, okay, they have their own lot and I'm going to pull into their lot because that's where you park for this restaurant. But the agreement to appropriately sign and publicize the parking in our lot only for this restaurant, I think is something that you guys can agree on if you want to at this proceeding.
There's nothing, we have no objection to putting information on a website, if we have a website for the restaurant that indicates that, patrons should park in our lot. That's easy enough to do. Assuming we have a website for the restaurant, which I assume we probably will. I can't imagine surrounding.
Please.
We will have a website, we'll be more than happy to put that on the website.
Mr. Raimondo has a question.
So, in a perfect world, do you have any requests or suggestions that would satisfy your problems with this?
Well, we had tried to work with the previous owner, because it's very hard to tell, especially if it's someone that's not familiar with that establishment. You don't know that there's parking in the rear. It's very hard to see that little driveway that goes around to the back. So we had asked them to line out there and parking in the rear. There was a sign that was placed out on the street. I think it said resident parking only, but that wound up getting taken down within like a month of it going back up, or within a month of it going up. So that would be one request. I still have this concern about the lack of privacy and the noise for the deck, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Permit parking only, but then how does that affect us? Do we have to pay for that?
Well,
what if we have someone that is coming to visit us?
That's something that the township would have to establish, not the zoning hearing board. And we can't make them do it because they don't have jurisdiction. Mr. Lambert doesn't have jurisdiction over Old Elm Street in order to put up those signs. He can only put a sign on his property that says parking for Lamberts here.
But do you take that into
Put the arrow.
consideration of us trying to get permit parking only before you approve any of the deck
That's something that you could do on a parallel course with this. I don't know what the board's going to do, but that's something that you can pursue with council on your own. That's something that we can't do. We don't have jurisdiction to do that.
Jumping over then to the deck, like what, if you are going to approve that, what are the requirements going to be to make sure that it does not impede on the people that live there in a negative way?
Well, I've heard there's testimony about both erecting a structure, a wall that will block sound, and also landscape buffering.
Privacy fence and landscape buffering is what we are currently envisioning.
Okay.
How about hours of operation on the deck? Like, why wouldn't they cut the deck off at 9 a.m.?
I was going to say,
That's exactly exactly what the chairman just said.
I think we could put that
The zoning hearing
condition.
board has the authority to put that condition on. We aren't asking for approval for a deck. We're permitted to have a deck. The only thing that we were asking for, if you deny the variance or if you deny the appeal, is related to the parking.
Well,
No other deck, no other restaurant in Plymouth Township has hour restrictions on it. So I don't believe
That's
that
true.
under the law that the zoning hearing board can put a condition on
I don't-
our use of a deck that discriminates from any other deck.
I
You've heard
believe-
what his hours of operation are.
I do believe we have put hours of operation limitations on restaurants. Mission Grill, I do believe we have put hours of operation limitations on.
And if they accepted them, then they're totally.
We put it as a condition of their approval.
right.
So
Again-
to say that we didn't do it, I don't think
They
it's
didn't
true.
No, I didn't say
They
you
didn't
do
appeal
it.
them.
I didn't say
They didn't
you
appeal them.
haven't done it.
Right.
I'm saying your ordinance doesn't provide for it.
We are entitled to put a reasonable condition on the grant of relief from this board. Now, whether, and people will argue about whether hours of operation is a applicable and appropriate condition to put on something, and I understand the argument, because your relief is for parking, not necessarily for a deck. But I don't think that precludes us from putting a condition on here.
Cars have to be started and driven on gravel at certain hours. And if the increase in the number of parking spaces is there because as a function of the deck, then I would argue that a time limitation on the deck is closely enough related to parking to be enforceable. Now, Rob will disagree vehemently, and, that's why they have courts. But, my point is, when the record is read on this whole thing, the judge will see that the whole thing is driven by the deck. You don't need relief for the restaurant. You need relief for the deck, and it's the number of parking spaces, et cetera. And, being so close to the neighbors raises, what can you do to help them? And maybe that's agree to close down the deck an hour before you close down the indoor restaurant. I'm trying to work this out here.
Again, I don't think it's appropriate to limit the hours on the deck when the only relief that we're talking about has to do with parking stalls. Okay, which one, I don't think we need the relief at all.
I understand that.
The board hasn't decided that issue.
I'm simply making my argument to you.
I understand.
So, to the extent we need any relief, it's not to build a deck. It's not to do with a restaurant. It can open a restaurant today. We can put the gravel parking in today. All of that can go today. It's a matter of whether or not additional parking is necessitated.
Mm-hmm.
So, my client needs to be able to have a successful restaurant and operate this restaurant. This is a very small restaurant. And so everything matters to him in terms of being able to serve his patrons and his clientele. If we're going to say that the parking somehow causes noise because it's on gravel, one, he can do it today, it's there today. But two, whether or not that deck closes isn't going to change when those people are getting in their cars and leaving at night. Because if you say, I got to shut down the deck, everybody, guess what? They're walking inside. And they're going to stick around to finish their wonderful bottle of wine, whatever it is, and they're going to leave at the same time. So I don't think that the parking that we are talking about has any effect on an hours of operation. And the argument that I was making, Mr. Mattioni, you can impose whatever conditions you want, particularly when somebody is willing to accept
I don't impose
them.
the conditions, but
You, being the board, can impose conditions that are reasonable, but they have to be related not only to the request for relief, but they also have to be within the confines of an ordinance requirement. Plymouth Township does not have an hours of operation ordinance requirement. So that's all I'm suggesting, is that to subject us to a requirement that nobody else has to under your ordinance is discriminatory, and it's not permitted.
Okay. Legally, you're probably absolutely correct.
Agreed.
We're here in front of the zoning hearing. That was funny too, Rob. We're here in front of the zoning hearing board, and we have some major concerns that we're trying to maybe mold some acceptable relief, conditions, et cetera. And that's why I posit that
I think the
potential.
The point we're trying to make is the indoor can be open till 2 in the morning. So that noise is contained. We're worried about 11:30 at night, shed air out of the deck, open up the window on a nice spring evening, trying to fall asleep, and all you hear is dishes clanging and people. That's what we're trying to work through. Not trying to, be rule bearing, and we want to obviously want to see a successful business as well. Would there be an agreement to put parking in the rear only sign or something that directs them around the back?
We'll, to the extent Dave permits us to get a sign that says all parking, for Lambert's in
Is
the
it
rear. we're happy
acceptable to
put
have
signs.
residential parking only signs? Is that something that you do or not?
We can't do that.
That's something you can't do, because that's dealing with.
I'm just
we can't deal with that.
trying to work through this here with you guys.
But that's something, you can't say parking for residents only, because that governs parking on the street. We don't have jurisdiction over the street. We can work with the applicant if the applicant is agreeable to put signage on the applicant's property saying parking here for this restaurant.
Yeah, that's easy. That's a no-brainer for us to do if just direct people. As was mentioned, it's hard to see where you go.
Well, I'll be honest with you.
Perhaps
When the Mansion House was open as a bar, I've been around here for over 20-some years, and you would swing down there, and everybody parked right in front.
Yep.
Like it really did. So nobody's making that up. Like you would just, you would pull in and park right there and run up the steps and go right in that front door. Rarely anybody went around back and came walking all the way back up. You know what I mean?
It's a restaurant in a community that, and this restaurant has existed for 100 years. It's always going to have challenges. You've heard a lot of those from the prior years. You know, people standing in the back parking lot, probably having an extra beer after the place closed, talking about 2 o'clock in the morning, people putting, stuff in the dumpster. So those are the challenges of having a restaurant right in the middle of a residential district. Hopefully, you're going to now finally have a much nicer, much better run restaurant. Am I saying that all that's going to go away? No. Those are fundamental issues of a restaurant in a residential community.
On the back deck, I'm sorry to interrupt you, are you going to have music piped out there for the diners?
How about a public address system?
No.
Is that really germane to what we're trying to do here, which is basically just deal with the parking?
You're correct. You're correct.
But the parking's driven by the deck.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, that's true.
It ties right back to the deck though. So.
Thank you guys for listening.
Sure.
Man, were those your photos?
Yes.
Since the board considered them, should we mark them?
We can certainly mark them.
Put them in the
As
record.
Gregory 1?
Yeah.
As Gregory 1. How many are there?
I see it every day.
Thank you.
I guess there's no further public comment? No.
If there are no other questions from the board, I would like to make sure that applicants' exhibits A1 through A7 are admitted into the record as well.
They're received.
Any further questions from the board? Nope. So, there are two issues, correct, Mr. Sanders?
Correct.
And the first issue is whether a variance is in fact required at all. You've seen Mr. Lewis's position on that. You've seen Dave Conroy's position on that. I guess we need to decide how to vote on that first.
That's correct.
So that is the first order of business, and that is whether a variance is required.
Well, the question that should be considered is, should the applicant's appeal from Dave Conroy's determination of November 18th, 2021, be granted? And if that is a motion that is made and seconded and considered, and if that passes, that would mean that Dave's opinion is incorrect, that they need this additional parking for the deck, because the deck is not a building as defined by the zoning ordinance, and there would be no need to reach the issue of a variance because they wouldn't need the additional parking. They would have 36 parking spaces, which is the number of parking spaces they need for the restaurant use. So the question is, should the appeal be granted, from Dave's decision, be granted or denied?
Right, so we need to have a motion on that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you may say. We have to have a motion, again, like he said, and that if you read Dave Conroy's email, he says the property owner would need to obtain a parking variance. That's based on section 1700D5 of the Township Zoning Code, because the proposed deck would be used to seat additional patrons. The square footage of the deck would need to be included in calculating the gross leasable floor area for parking space purposes. This approach would also be consistent with how the township has handled similar cases in the past. If the applicant does not agree, they can file an appeal, and that is what they did, because Dave said that the deck, again, is considered, under his opinion, gross leasable floor area, and then requires additional parking space. So we need to have a motion from the board as to whether to grant the appeal It was filed by Mr. Lewis. It can be an up or a down, it doesn't matters, but but we need a motion on that opinion.
So is section 6 in his, is that the only piece of ordinance that applies to that email? And this,
Well, those are the pieces of ordinance that the applicant has given
Right,
us.
right.
And they flow starting with D5, which says 1 space for every 50 square feet of gross leasable floor area is required for a restaurant. Then you go to gross leasable floor area, and that says, come on, gross leasable floor area is the total floor area for which the tenant pays rent directly or indirectly. So far, that includes the deck. And/or which is designed for the tenant's use and/or occupancy, and exclusively and/or in common with all other tenants and/or business invitees. For the purpose of this chapter, gross leasable floor area shall include the term net rentable area. So the word floor area is used in that definition, Tom, right? The third and fourth words of that definition are floor area. Well, what's floor area? Look right above it. Floor area is the sum of the gross horizontal areas of all floors of a building measured from the exterior walls or from the center line of a wall separating 2 buildings, but not to include interior parking spaces, loading space for motor vehicles, or any area where the floor-to-ceiling height is less than 6.5 feet. So they use the word building in that definition of floor area. Then you go to definition of building, and building says any structure having enclosing walls and a roof intended for supporting or sheltering a use or occupancy and attached to the land. Building includes structure and shall be construed as if followed by the words or parts thereof. Included shall be all manufactured homes and trailers to be used for human habitation. So you go from how do you calculate the parking for a restaurant through 2 other definitions to a third definition of the term building, and that's a structure having enclosed walls and a roof, which the deck doesn't have, is their argument.
Or parts thereof, though, is that not,
Well,
does that include something like a deck? Because that could be part of a building?
That was raised,
We're
that
gonna
was
have
raised.
2 walls here, right?
That was raised, but Mr. Lewis argued that the first sentence of the definition is the baseline
Right.
of the definition. And it has to be any structure having enclosing walls and a roof intended for supporting or sheltering a use or occupancy and attached to the land, period. That's the threshold. If it doesn't have a walls and a roof, it's not a building. Now, building includes, am I putting that correctly, Mr.
I
Lewis?
think so, and Mr. Senator, may I just add one caveat too for the board's consideration? You heard another application this evening for a parking variance, and you even heard during the testimony of that hearing that there are districts in Plymouth Township that calculate parking differently. It calculates it based on number of seats, but there are many districts, including this district, or the general consensus for a restaurant, the general category, 1700 D5, says restaurants based on floor area. And you have to abide by the definitions in the ordinance. And so I understand Mr. Conroy in the past has had other instances where they have applied this to outdoor seating. All I'm saying to you is this is what the ordinance provides. And my client is only required to provide what the ordinance requires. And I think when you hear your solicitor, he may reach a different conclusion or advise you differently. But I think when you read those ordinance provisions, it's very clear. You have to be a building to be floor area, to be gross leasable floor area, and therefore to require parking for a restaurant. This is not a building, it's a deck. Therefore, additional parking is not required.
I don't disagree with Mr. Lewis. The only legal argument here is the second sentence of the definition of building. Quote, building, which is the term that's being defined, includes, quote, structure, okay, and shall be construed as if followed by the words, quote, or parts thereof, close quote. And if Mr. Lewis and I are briefing this case for a court, Mr. Lewis is going to state the argument that he just stated. I'm going to state that building includes parts thereof. And a deck floor that has seating and the intention of the ordinance is to provide parking for patrons of uses. And the only reason it's not in this district is because a restaurant is not a use permitted by right. It's permitted by special exception. But those are the two competing legal arguments.
Mr. Conroy, off the top of your head, you refer to similar cases being handled in a similar manner. Do you know any offhand?
Where I've counted the deck area.
Yeah, like you said, this is how it was handled earlier. Is there any?
Fingers, wings, and other things last year. Franzone's Pizza last year as well. And there were probably several more from several years ago.
So it's not uncommon for you to add outside seating as parking requirement?
No, it is not.
But you have to look at what zoning district they're in.
Correct.
If, as Mr. Lewis said, parking is calculated by the number of seats, then that's easy. You put seats on a deck, the deck counts. Here, in this zoning district, parking is not calculated by the number of seats. It's calculated by gross leasable floor area, and floor area references building. So again, is this a loophole? Is this a technicality? Sure, but that's where we are.
So if we decline the appeal, what happens next?
We move to the question of whether the board wishes to grant a variance to allow 36 parking spaces where 66 are required.
So is that their request in the alternate?
That's an alternative request, yes.
And then if it goes to an alternative request, then we could put different restrictions.
Conditions. You can attach conditions to the grant of the variance. I would, referring to the earlier testimony, I would suggest that the board, if it frames conditions, ask the applicant tonight whether those conditions are acceptable to it.
But I think we still have to address the first issue.
Correct.
And the first issue is whether we are going to grant the appeal of Dave Conroy's decision regarding the deck and parking. So I will ask to see if we have a motion on that appeal.
Let me address one question before you make a motion. And Rob, you tell me what you think about this. If the board is of a mind to grant the appeal, can it not also place conditions on the granting of the appeal that are acceptable to the applicant? I don't want to there are certain conditions that I think the applicant has certainly agreed to. Maintenance of the parking spaces in the gravel parking lot, minimal lighting that won't shine on other properties, website publicity and signage for parking in the back, privacy fence and landscape buffering, no music or public address system on the deck. If the board makes a motion and passes a motion to grant the appeal and wants to attach conditions that are acceptable to the applicant, is that acceptable to you?
We don't have any issue with those conditions as stated. We're going to do them anyway. So those are all things that my client intends to do to operate his business.
That doesn't answer the question.
All I'm saying is, so we're doing them anyway. My only question is whether or not there's the legal authorization to do it. You're welcome to do it.
But that's why we're asking, will you agree?
And I'm saying, Mr. Marioni, I'm saying, I don't, in the code, right, I don't know what happened, other than saying, because technically all the board is saying by granting an appeal, or is to say, parking's not required. And I just don't know legally if we can attach a condition to that such that it's not something that somebody else could appeal. We're not going to appeal it. We're fine with it, because we're going to do it. So that's what I'm saying, Mr. Sanders, Yes, those conditions are fine to us. If you apply them to the grant of our appeal of the determination, it's fine, because we're gonna do them anyway.
Okay.
I just don't know if those are legally.
Okay,
Well,
we may never
But
reach that question.
that's a secondary issue, but it does provide some level of some comfort to the neighbors, probably not the level of comfort that they would like, but some level of comfort that they can say, hey, you had a guy playing guitar out there Thursday night. It bothered me, it woke me up. That was on the deck. You said at the zoning board that you wouldn't do that. I want the township to go out there with code enforcement and shut that down. And otherwise, they don't have anything to hang their hat on at all.
Understood.
And that gives them something.
Understood.
And that's why if you agree to it, then I think that it would be enforceable because you've agreed to it.
And we
It's
just-
not us imposing it without your agreement.
And we just agreed to it, so.
Okay.
Right, that was the question. Whether the board will put that
That's-
motion out there is another issue.
That's what I wanted to establish for the board. I didn't want the board to necessarily think that, well, if we grant the appeal, we can attach conditions, but if we grant a variance, we can. You know, and again, I'm not even sure I know the answer to that question legally.
But if it is agreed upon, then I think that there's something to look to.
If you want
So,
us to step out, Mr. Prelay, we're happy to. You can step out. if you
I want
want.
to still step out. I gotta run to the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
can we
Yeah.
go off the record for a minute? Thank you. Run down. And we can go out anyway.
Yes, I'm going to go around that way. That's dangerous.
We're back on the record. And do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to grant the appeal from the determination of the Plymouth Township zoning officer dated November 18th, 2021. The additional off-street parking is required to account for proposed deck at the property located 641 Old Elm Street in a D residential zoning district, subject to certain conditions.
Which would be that, first, that the applicant will maintain clearly marked parking spaces on the gravel parking lot and continue to allow them to be clearly visible for folks to park there. Second, that lighting be installed that will not shine onto or spill onto neighboring properties. Third, that the applicant promote on its website for the restaurant any other publicity that it may issue for the restaurant and install appropriate signage on the property noting that parking for the restaurant shall be on the property in the lot behind the restaurant. Fourth, that the applicant erect a privacy fence and landscape buffering around the deck to minimize the noise and other impacts of folks eating out on the deck. Fifth, that there's no music, no amplified music, or otherwise, I guess, no music at all, or public address system on the deck. And I think those are all the conditions.
I believe that's, is that acceptable, Mr. Daly?
Yes.
Okay. Do
Mr.
we have a
Chairman,
second to the motion?
I second.
Okay. Let's have a vote. Ms. Pagat,
In favor.
Mr. Daly,
In favor.
Mr. Aprile,
In favor.
Mr. Raimondo.
In favor.
Oh, the chair votes in favor, so.
Thank you, everybody.
Good luck to you, because I do think it would be nice to have a very nice restaurant there. I mean, I was in the Mansion House a few times. It's a different place, and I'd like to see you succeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin.